Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is the 140th edition of the Journey series. And I had to delete all my old Journey series. And, I have them all saved, and I will hopefully eventually do something with them because there are people who really want them. I just have to figure out what I'm going to do. But a lot of it I can recreate. I can tell the stories again. Some of it was live action, things that were going on, and some of it exposing Dodgy. But either way, if you go to my new channel, the channel entitled Exposing the Heartfulness Cult Dodgy Scam, and it's linked in the description box of all my videos. Just scroll down in the description box. I have people asking me questions to put in the link, and then the link's there. And the link works. I've changed the name a couple of times, but that's the new name that should be there in all of my new videos. But in that channel, I have a lot of Journey series stuff. It's stuff that could easily be in the Journey series. It's just exposing Dodgy and the Heartfulness scam. And it's a part of what I've discovered by going through the Journey series and doing the Journey series. Not only on my spiritual journey, but also documenting it and putting it up on YouTube, and then getting feedback from Abiasi struggling with Dodgy, and then all this information coming to me, which I've documented, and then all the stuff that's going on now with the organization. And so Dodgy and his cronies stupidly copyrighted me, and this channel now exists because of that, right? Which is a huge mistake from him, because now there's a channel that's devoted just to exposing him, and all I have to do is not use copyrighted material. And, they're probably trying to come up with ways to stop me and silence me. But, it's just going to be there. And people are already finding it, either Abiasis who are upset by what's happening with Dodgy, or new people who are questioning the validity of the system. And so by their own censorship, by their own suppressing these things, whenever you censor something, whenever you use force, it finds another way, right? It doesn't go away. You can't stop people from telling the truth, and that's just, borne out by human history. It eventually comes up. And now it's coming up, and, they don't know what to do with it because they've lied for so long, and they thought that they could control it and get away with it, and they're floundering. But, even if I went away and the channel went away, it's going to come back up. They can't stop it. They're stupid for even trying, because it's just there. People are upset by this. They've done something wrong. They're acting like the victims. They portray themselves in the victims in their own minds, but they've robbed us all of something great, something beautiful, and they've contaminated it with Dodgy's lies. And I'll get into that because I have a video I just put up about Dodgy's lies. And it's, kind of epic, I think. And it fits right in with everything I've talked about here in the Journey series. So I'm going to add that at the end. I have a couple other voiceovers. I'm not sure what's in them, but those are from earlier. Those are pre I don't know when they were done, but they were around the time or before the time that they first copyrighted my Gratefullness meditation channel, and then eventually did the stuff with the Journey series. And of course, they pissed a lot of you guys off because of them doing it, right? Because, I can't lose the channel over the Journey series. So I had to delete the videos. The channel means more to people and me and, everything than that. And of course, I can do these new Journey series videos. Before you know it, there'll be hours of content back up on there. And now I'll be saying the same things, and even worse, because I've discovered more. I've learned things from doing this work. Even though it's had a negative effect on me, I've had a little bit of a headache the last couple of days, and I've just been feeling, it's depressing dealing with these scumbags, right? People who fail, people who have gone the low path, especially when they're supposed to be spiritual. There's nothing worse than a fallen spiritual person. Criminals, are criminals, right? People who do bad things are people who do bad things. Someone who was once a saint, a higher developed soul, and people who aspire to be spiritual, and then they go to the dark side. They're the worst, right? They're the real demons. Like a criminal doesn't have that far to fall, and they never had any real divine powers. That's like Lucifer's, the devil is supposed to be a fallen angel, right? People that go from a high level and then fall, they become the worst. And they just, they were there with God and they chose ultimately to go in another direction. It's really bad. And that's what's happened here with Heartfulness. And it's, it sucks for me to have to be in contact with them in any way, shape, or form. I hope that they stop, they just accept this being out there and they just go on their merry way because they, I don't want anything to do with them, right? You're a real downer. You suck really bad. Like they suck as people and as the vibrations are given off and all of it. Dodgy being the big one. And so, being free from them and that organization has helped me. And so talking about it, and especially focusing on it in this new channel has not been great. And it's hurt me in terms of making other content. And, I don't feel as good as I usually do. This has been a little bit stressful. I'll be glad when it's over, when I just do it from time to time. Because there's nothing good from it for me personally. Like I've learned things and, whatever reward I get for doing this work, but it's like scrubbing a toilet, right? You have a clean toilet afterwards, but you have to scrub it. And that's what this kind of work is to me. All the work that I do is like that, but this is particular because the people who I'm talking about are watching the videos and they are, whatever they are, and connecting with them is something where I know them personally, right? There's a different level of connection there than talking about Joe Biden or any of these other people. And so there's that. And so, so this is the new Journey series. There's a couple of voiceovers I got to show you, then a video I made today. Then I'll wrap it up on the other end. But, it's just a new beginning to the Journey series. So the young woman sitting there with Dodgy and with Kamlesh and with Chargy is his granddaughter, and the guy behind him at the end was his grandson. I'll come back to this in a moment, the talk he just gave, or what he said there. This stamp, going back to this stamp, Master Chargy's father was put in the Central Region. He mentioned K.C. Radachari, who was a religious professor, a doctor, K.C. Radachari, who was a brilliant scholar that Babaji spent a lot of time and energy into bringing him into the mission. And then also, he put him in the Central Region. And he said that he put K.C. Radachari ahead of him in the Central Region, farther along than Babaji was himself. And, Master Chargy went to this guy as a preceptor, and the guy taught him so much about religion, spirituality, and, historical aspects of things. Like he was, a brilliant man. And then at one point, Babaji said that you're his chela, meaning you're his disciple and not mine, to Chargy. And so Chargy realized he was paying more attention to K.C. Radachari, who was a Brahmin, and lived close to Chargy. So he lived within, driving distance, and Chargy and his father would go to this guy for sittings. And Chargy was then made secretary of the mission, which was, he was in charge of all the, all the business aspect of the mission and all the organizational aspect. And K.C. Radachari was not told by Babaji. And he found out, and Chargy and his father showed up at K.C. Radachari's house. And K.C. Radachari just went, yelled at him, like he didn't give them a sitting. And he just yelled at, mostly Chargy about, he felt betrayed and all these things. He just lost it. This was covered in Chargy's diary. And he just went after him. And at the end of it, he said, look at you sitting there all calm. While, he was, he was insulting him and, being very emotional. And he goes, that's your business training. And he said, no, it's my spirit. Chargy said, no, it's my spiritual training. And so that was like a classic line. But K.C. Radachari plummeted. And Babaji, he went from the Central Region to where Babaji was just trying to save his liberation. And he just got, he just never came back from that. He just was, hurt in some way, his ego. And eventually his son, who was in and out of the mission, Casey Chari's son, started an offshoot of something like an organization that he, they were like they worship Babaji and his dad. But he was kind of close to Charji, and Charji kept him in there. But like he just eventually just because of his dad and his dad going south, he ended up forming his own organization. And so he was somebody, Casey Chari, who was in the central region. I talked about this kind of extensively in this series, which I'll talk about in just a bit as well. But Charji's father, Charji called him a giant of a man, even though he was much physically smaller than Charji himself. Charji was like 6'2", 6'3". His dad wasn't as big, but his dad was, he had a very hard life. He lost his wife, Charji's mom, at an early age. He never remarried because he didn't think the new wife would, he had 3 sons. He lost a daughter. His wife and daughter died after childbirth, and Charji was the oldest in his family. He was 5 years old when that happened. And so, he had 2 brothers, and, he wrote this epic chapter about his dad. And his dad was looking through a telescope at some university, and someone hadn't put the lens in correctly. And so it burned out his eye. They didn't assemble, so there was some kind of issue with the telescope. Very kind of Indian story. So he'd lost one eye, had like a glass eye, and all these things that he had to overcome, all these tragedies and all the stuff that his dad had to do, and he somehow, made it through it. And he became an Abhyasi when Charji did, and eventually Babaji put him in the central region because he was older and things. And he got into stamp collection. He became a stamp collector. This is the reference to Babaji's stamp. And he got so into it, like it pulled his consciousness down to a mundane level, and he fell from the central region. And Babaji they were trying to all talk to him about it, and, just to stay focused and be spiritual and, be thinking about God and remember God and, all these things. And, but he was so obsessed with this hobby, seems like an innocent thing. But, this is Charji's reference to at the end of this talk where he says, we're not here to build statues, which Daji's now doing. We're not here to be, memorialized in some way, and we might even be forgotten. And in Charji's case, I mean, sadly, that's what's happening. Like all of his books, like next generations of Abhyasis won't even know Charji's greatness, unless there's something that's salvaged, and I don't know how that will be because of what Daji's done. And maybe that's, what's going to happen anyway, and that was supposed to happen or whatever, but it's, it feels like kind of a tragedy because Charji's greatness was such an example of what Saj Marg could do for you. What kind of person you could become if you, on all levels of your, your performance at work, your performance at, in every aspect of your life. And Charji was the epitome of that, right? And him saying that Saj Marg will go on for thousands of years, Babaji gave these messages, and I've read these messages myself, and it's something that's, given me hope over this, Daji debacle. And that Saj Marg was going to change, and humans are going to change, and it's not going to stay in its current form. But what it's changed into, and I said this at the end of the Heartfulness, when I was talking about Daji and Heartfulness on the other channel. So I'm very grateful to have that over with, and I'll get into that in just a bit. But, the continuation of the system, and that's what I've tried to strive for here at the these more recent journey series and the Gratefulness meditation. And one thing that I've, gathered, I don't want to call it hope, I don't know what it is, but, over the years, I realized, there's a couple things with Saj Marg. And one of them is, even if you're restless and you're not feeling like you're meditating, you don't think you're doing it right, or you don't feel the energy. If you go through it, oftentimes afterwards, it's the condition is phenomenal. And Charji said his best sittings were ones where he felt really restless. That the restless sittings were the ones that had the most profound effect. But I've learned that, early on, like I would be meditating in the morning, and I wouldn't feel anything. I wouldn't feel connected. And then time dragged. It would be like an hour, I'd be meditating for an hour in the morning. And it seemed like 5 hours. It seemed like it never ended. I was restless. But if I, stuck it out to the very end, I would feel transmission, like even for just a minute at the end. And then I would be feeling good all day. Like it just, if I just sort of powered through it. And so there was that. And, going through cleanings, going through difficult phases, difficult, times in my life or whatever. And, just working the practice and getting sittings and, just sticking with it, grinding it out, right? And it's had phenomenal benefits, right? And that's, kind of what's happening now with Daji and Heartfulness. I mean, not so much for me anymore, but different people, now that I'm focused on the gratefulness stuff. But that was a grinded out time where I wasn't feeling much in the sittings. And, Daji's was just, the more information I found out, the worse it was. And the other aspect of this is, Babaji said once somebody takes their initial 3 sittings, they're coming back. If it isn't in their next life, it'll be in the life after that. That once you get introduced to the system, your soul wants this. Your soul is making sure this is something that it's going to pursue in future existences. And you'll be better at it, right? And so that's the other thing that's given me hope. That, like, if people came and took 3 sittings and went away, that they'll be back. And that, there's at least a connection that was made. There was in an interview that was done, the guy had a Boston accent, and he was like a guy who interviewed psychics and, a lot of stuff to do with people who had died. He had a whole YouTube channel devoted to like people who died and came back, had near-death experiences and things. But it was a spiritual, not so much a morbid, or it was like a spiritual thing. And it was funny because the guy had this like heavy Boston accent. And he brought some guy on who was, I guess he was maybe what you consider part of a New Age community, but he was practical. He wasn't like, a typical New Age person. And the interview went around in the mission because this guy wrote a book that Charji said, there's a lot of stuff in here that's correct. And the book was about how this guy interviewed psychics and mediums and people like that, as many as he could find. And the consensus was that, when you die, your soul goes to like, for lack of a better word, like some sort of a room, an area where it has a spiritual support team, and your life is reviewed for you. Your life and the things that you, on an etheric level, because you don't have a mind like we have here. It's different level of thought process, but your life is reviewed, and then the treatment plan is put into place, and you have a spiritual support team, and then you come back down and incarnate again. And there's, some preparation for your next life based on, what you accomplished or you didn't accomplish in your previous existence. And, it's like a spiritual treatment plan. And, this resonated with all of us and certainly was echoed in Whispers of the Brighter World, and Charji endorsed this thing. It's an interesting interview, and I don't know if you guys will ever find it. I can't remember the name of the book, but this guy wrote a whole book about this, which again was, a complementary book to the Sajmark system and the Whispers of the Brighter World, because it was, read by Charji, and he said that this guy was, there's also that Conversations with God book, where some guy just started asking God questions, and Charji said the guy was in contact with Babaji, like Babaji was answering the guy's questions, what the guy, thought was, God, because God doesn't have a mind, and there's these higher developed souls that are actually there, being a conduit connecting people to divinity and, overseeing the, whatever's going on here on planet Earth. And knowing that there's a soul plan, and, these things are accidental, and, even Daji's, whatever he's done, his sham of a mastery, there's a purpose for it. There's part of a plan. And, I have to believe that, or otherwise it's pointless to do what I'm doing. But I've been shown over and over again there's a plan. And the one thing I got out of doing this series on my other channel, the Gratefullness Meditation channel, is that, I realized, and I got some comments from, negative comments or people endorsing dodgy comments or condemning me comments. I read these things and whatever. And I didn't enjoy doing the series. It was a drag, but now that it's over, I feel great. I did a sitting this morning. I'm doing a intensive, just sort of clean everything out and just it's different. It's funny because I can make a video here in Journey series, but when I make videos here, it's somewhat cathartic. If I talk about Dodgy and these things, it's not for Abiasis, and it doesn't seem like there's much difference in my videos, but there is from channel to channel, and how I feel about them and who I'm speaking to. It's just different, and I don't really want to connect with Abiasis because of their failure to, again, I don't know what's failure or not based in, but whether they failed or not, or they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, it's still a bad look, right? For them to say they love Chargy so much, when somebody was so great as Chargy was, and the next guy is such a dud. I mean, it's like such a fall off. It's hard to express how much of a fall off it is, and people have accepted that and accepted the dud, demeaning the guy who was so great. When they all knew, we all there, we saw how Chargy was and the epic amount of work that he produced. We can even see in this video the difference between when Chargy talked. I mean, Chargy has false teeth in this video, and he's 2 months away from dying. This is in October. He's going to die in December. And, listen to this. I mean, the clarity of his thought. I mean, the guy's waking up and he said, like, I don't know where I am. Like, he's disoriented. He's not even able to, like, keep it together. He's like, his soul's expanding and he's leaving his body. And he's still able to articulate that coherently. So much so that two people who found out about Sajmark from me sent me this video. Like, they both, it was released a day ago. And they were both impressed by it, right? And so that's how great he was. But, you have this fall off. But what I realized doing the series, the one takeaway for me, like I said, it dragged on and it just sort of bummed me out. And when I get, hear these people talk about how much denial they, and whenever you deal with sheeple, like whenever you're in a position where, I wasn't trying to wake these people up, but it's like that's kind of what's happening. I'm making the videos because I feel like I would have to. I know I'm not going to change these people, their minds, but I'd rather not know what it's like. Like, I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to have a relationship with them. I don't want to hear their opinions. If they had a YouTube channel or, if they were on social media, I'd unfriend them. If they were posting things that I'm not interested in their worldview or these things that they're doing, right? Because, they're not they're sheeple. They're, everything we've come to know and love about sheeple, everything we've come to know and expect from sheeple, I should say. And, with all of that, I just realized that the quality of the Abiasis is so bad. And, like, we kind of deserve, well, not kind of, we deserve, Kamlish is the master we deserve. The masters we had before in the system were blessings, and they were more than we deserved. And certainly the Sajmark system is more than we deserved, right? And so, like, you can't put this all on Dodgy because, these people were, they're just not very good at doing this, and they're just, whatever it is. But like I said, the thing I can take away from this is that I realized early on that, I was maybe not living up to the ideals of the system. Like, I wasn't able to go to that level, reading about how Babaji was and seeing how Chargy was. I wasn't going to be like that committed and that, into it. But just keep on going at whatever I'm doing here. Just keep on, trucking along and just, whatever it is, the saying is. And, keep on going. Regardless of whether it's as good as, the best people who do the system or, just keep on going. Just keep on moving forward. Because I'm playing the long game here. It doesn't matter if I make it to the central region this life or even if I get liberated, as long as I'm moving forward. And that, next life it'll be easier. Next life will build upon the work that's being done here. And that's really the essence of the Sajmark teaching, right? We're creating, we've created our present in the past. And we're creating our future in the present. And so, our decisions we make, you know, I talked about this, how, you know, Tuesday Paul screwed over Thursday Paul or whatever. You know, I was cutting my hair and I, you know, using the, I shave, yeah, I do like, once in a while I shave my beard a little bit and I cut my hair, you know, I start cutting my hair, my wife finishes the process and I chose not to plug in the clippers and, you know, and that left me to have to do that work later on. Like I was lazy or tired or whatever it was. But, you know, I realized that I was screwing over, making it more difficult for myself in the future. And I thought about decisions I made where, you know, you do this on a daily basis where you know, you're eating foods that like are bad for you, or you know, you use drugs or alcohol, you do something, and you're screwing over your future version of yourself, right? As you age, these bad decisions pile up, and it, you know, they come back to hurt you and haunt you. And this is on a, you know, a spiritual level, something to think about. And so, and so as long as people continue meditating, continue connecting, even, you know, if they can't connect as well through Daji, but that's all they got or whatever, they're not able to break free like we were able to do here in Gratefulness. You know, I mean, you have to have hope in a future existence. But right now, it looks pretty dim. Like right now, the Abiyasis suck and Daji is horrible. Like that's the reality. And so that's what's happening in the present. And, you know, we all have to deal with that to some extent. All of us who do the system and practice, but the transmission's still flowing. The cleaning's still happening. And there's still, you know, spiritual opportunity here. And, you know, like that's the hope of it. But what, like I said, I realized is it's not all on Daji, because like this is the master all of us deserve, especially, you know, these people, because it didn't matter who they threw out there. They're just so indoctrinated into the master culture, you know, the whole guru culture, especially people in India, that they're going to accept anyone because they can't, you know, they're sheeple. And hopefully there'll be more lions in the system, you know, people who are sheeple now will be lions in the future. And, you know, like it just has to move on from time, you know, this age, this period of time, and then future existences. And that, you know, that just some kind of forward movement. And so playing the long game is like all we got now. Like there's no immediate solutions. There's no immediate solving of any kind of problem. But playing the long game is essential. But like I said, you know, getting into contact, making videos that were targeting Abiyasis, and, you know, or that was the targeted audience. And, you know, just seeing them, there's a lack of comments, a lack of, you know, again, I usually don't check these things out, but I want to see the ratio between likes and dislikes. And there was only 21 dislikes, and there was 90 likes, and there was a video that got 2,000 views. And I'm like, you know, pick a side, right? I mean, just, like, it's just, you know, non-consequential. And so, you know, I usually feel good when I make the Journey series. Like, I enjoyed doing these audios, but I didn't feel great about the other thing. But after it was done, you know, I felt like, wow, that was like, you know, I benefited in some way spiritually. I had a good meditation this morning, and I started doing, like I said, the intensive today. Just, you know, and I feel good. Like, I feel like, whatever, it's, I'm glad it's over with, but I think it, you know, was something that needed to be done. Like, I did my part, and it's just out there. And I don't know what good it's going to do or not, but, you know, there's a few people who, at least one person who was riding the fence and struggling because of the idea of the Chargy. You know, again, some of it's on the former masters, but, you know, I would say the best way to look at it at this point is it just is supposed to happen. And so, you know, I want to spend less and less time talking about Daji here, and get more into just, you know, the gratefulness aspect, the gratefulness meditation aspect of the thing with the Journey series. I'll cover it, you know, again in April. I'll cover the Bandaras. If anything big happens, I mean, the Daji Truther is going to send me things or whatever. But, you know, I just, at this point, it's overkill for me. Like, I don't need to talk about Daji. And, you know, and I feel pretty, you know, good about the whole thing. Like, it's just, I have a positive feeling about all of it. You know, that's, you know, we just have to endure this period of time, and, you know, whatever's going to happen next is going to happen, and, you know, there'll be something in the future for all of us to continue on with that'll be better, and people will be better prepared, and future existences, and you'll have people who have who've done 30, 40, 50 years of Saj Marg, and that's substantial work that they've done, sittings and preceptor stuff. I want to do more preceptor stuff here too, like that's part of my goal. But I'll talk about that in future, the future editions of this one. So that's it for today. Okay, so I wasn't going to add to the Journey series today. It's still Wednesday, February 21st. I got my regular video out and up on Apocalypse Now, and I'm going to work on the start of my video for tomorrow or whatever for Pockets of the Future. But I got some epic comments. I got one comment that was, attacking comment on the Gratefullness meditation. And then someone sent me a couple of messages with their negative experience, longtime Abhyasis, being grateful for my videos because they, the person is, and their family, I guess, was experiencing these things, right? I released the rest of the videos, all 5 of the remaining videos, so all that playlist is complete. I'm going to put those videos on this playlist because it's part of the Journey series, and then, I just want to be kind of done with it. There'll be comments coming in for a little bit of time, and then there'll be that, then I can move on. I just don't want to think about it all that much, but, as with all these things, it's often not my choice. I personally, like I said, I wanted to move on just because of the, the negativity involved. But this person writes this to me here. This is a negative comment. Now, this video, if Daji is the guide of Global Organization of Heartfulness, he needs to explain himself just like everybody else. And in that video, I talk about how this is my experience and many of our experiences. And people in India, you guys have this reverence, people from India, the Indian country and culture, they have a reverence for the elderly, for elders, and certainly for gurus and these types of people. They get a certain pass and they're above reproach and things. But for the rest of the world, I say if he's a global guide, then, he's going to be scrutinized in America and Europe and places where he's going to be viewed as a leader of a cult. That's what people are going to assume, right? That's how we view these kind of things in the West. So I was making the point that, this is cultural differences as well as my experience and many people's experience with Daji is a bad one. The internet's a brutal place, and he won't face up and answer these questions and explain his bad decisions. And, so these videos exist, right? And so that kind of, there's a boundary there saying you don't have to watch it. Like I said, if you don't want to watch it, if you see the title, you know what it's about. You know what these videos are about. So if you watch the video, that's on you, right? If you're a person that is not open to changing your opinion about Daji and these things, why are you watching it? You're not doing it for me. I don't care. I don't care if you watch it or not. I'm not trying to change your mind, right? And even when I said that, like it, went on for some time, explaining the introduction to the playlist, this is what the person says. A person who says he's practiced meditation under a guide who appointed the current one, but the person has opened their own practice and yet calling the current one names who is the appointed by the predecessor. Well, I didn't open my own practice. What we're doing is Saj Marg, and we're just connecting directly. This isn't a practice. There's, I'm providing a service from my years of experience, but it's nothing more than that. I'm certainly not the guru or anything, whatever. You guys know. Your heart doesn't belong to the previous one either, and is a disservice to him. Well, I didn't cancel his birthday celebration. I didn't say that he that he wasn't in the brighter world. I didn't tell disparaging stories and talk about his failure. That was all Daji. And Daji has more to be grateful for than anybody. I've never said anything negative about Charji. And, I limited what I said about Daji until it became obvious to me that he had fallen, that he's not a real master. And whatever that means for Charji, whatever responsibility that is on Charji and Daji or Babaji, I don't know. I don't know about that. But the facts are there. This guy's a buffoon. But I say to the person, you guys don't have to watch this. These videos aren't for you. If these are for people who have some doubts And I'm going to read this message from somebody. At least I'll summarize it because, I don't want to reveal anything personal. The person, wrote, somewhat personal things about their experience with the mission. But, I can read it in whatever way without exposing the person's identity, and they've struggled with this stuff, right? You just think about how it's possible for the hate to stay in your heart that you have time to make longer than 1.5 hour long videos to spew lies and venom. Well, what lies am I spewing? Like, I show you video clips, and they're not lies. I show you the actual video clips. The Brighter Minds is a scam. It's been exposed as a scam by some Abiasi exposed it. Amongst, it was a scam before Dodge even did it. The RSS is, already considered whatever it's considered, and the people are lost their enthusiasm and people don't watch them. And this is here, what you've learned under Reverend Chargy, that is not working for you, and you have completely pushed your own spiritual wealth of practice down the drain. And who are you to, why? Because I've said things that bother your little pea brain that are over your head that you can't understand this, the evidence and the, whatever's here. Like you're not qualified to judge what I've done with my spiritual practice or not. Even the milder spiritual practice, a person moves away from such behavior, yet you are continuing. Well, you're doing this in this comment, right? At least I'm honest about it. Like, I'm not saying that I'm some spiritual giant. I'm not saying any of those things. This isn't about me. I know that I'm, rude and sometimes mean and, I say things and I mock people. I'm not saying those are spiritual behaviors. I've explained this in my other videos, right? I'm not going to explain it here, but, the internet's a rough place and it's what I have to do to deal with, fools like this. But you're engaging in this behavior, so you're bringing yourself down to my level. Even with a milder spiritual practice, a person moves away from such behaviors that you are continuing. A moment of anger pollutes the heart and disturbs the mind. You've never seen me angry. Like, this is not me angry, right? Like, if I was angry, it'd be a lot worse. Like, my anger is, minimal compared to what it used to be. I very seldom get angry. And there's no hate. I don't feel hate at all. If it was hatred for Dodgy, this would be way worse than it is. And the personal things that Dodgy's done to me, and then the global things that he's done to all of us in terms of wrecking something so great, part of me gives him a pass because I think it's part of a plan. I mean, not so much a pass. I don't think this was accidental. I don't think this wasn't going to happen. I think it was, was meant to happen. So, for that, I can't, blame him for being a stooge that he was supposed to be a stooge, right? I mean, he's responsible for his own actions, and yet this was supposed to happen. And again, I saying, somewhere in this playlist that it's the Abiasis who don't deserve any better, right? Because this is a reflection of the, me and this preceptor, guy who's now a preceptor, we used to be friends, a guy who's about around my age, one of the few people around my age, and he was, more of an edgy person than most of the people in the mission, and we used to talk quite often. And we were talking about how the system would fall. This is back in 2000, not even before that, 1990 something, 1997 or 8. And we talked about, and I know very little, I didn't know a fraction what I know now about the mission, but we were saying that the mission would fall apart if there wasn't a good, strong living master like Chargy. Like if Chargy didn't leave a representative, the mission would fall apart. We already knew about the conflict and drama, and I only knew a little bit. Like I knew so much more now. But it was obvious that, it's unfortunate because these are spiritual people. These are people with past lives who have, accomplished something and created some, whatever it is to be able to experience the grace that's given in Saj Marg. These are some of these people are heavy hitters. Some of these people have past lives as significant spiritual people, famous people. And yet, there's just a failure here. And like I said, looking at the long game, sure, it's great. But, like I'm not completely putting this all on Dodgy is what I'm saying. It says, a moment of anger pollutes the heart and disturbs the mind. Don't know how you are able to do every day and yet calling yourself spiritual. I don't, I'm on a spiritual path, but I'm not spiritual Paul, right? There was this guy at a treatment center where I used to work that was named Spiritual Bob, and he was a Christian. And he had this guy with glasses. Spiritual Bob had, I think, sort of reddish hair. And Spiritual Bob was like really gay, or at least very effeminate. Maybe he was closeted gay, I don't know. And the kids were very mean and rude and triggered by gay people. These were kids who were sexually abused. And Spiritual Bob would get up there and sing, and the other guy would play the guitar. And it was a Catholic institution that owned the treatment center. And it was a real treat to watch because these kids were so rude and they would say horrible things. But that was Spiritual Bob. I'm not Spiritual Paul. But again, this guy thinks it's like he can. I mean, you have a remedial idea of what's going on here. The people in Saj Marg, they should have really great reading abilities, even just as an Abhyasi, but certainly as a preceptor. I'm good at reading people, and I have this like sort of talent, and I have a background in, I'm a counselor, and I got a master's in counseling, so I learned how to do assessment measures, but I've always been good at that. And being a preceptor and doing Saj Marg have enhanced those abilities. You are able to read situations and see through the veneer of their fake persona, what's called presenting. Like this person presented as being narcissistic, but then you would see insecurities and things beneath the narcissism, right? And these people should be able to read better, be able to read somebody, and they suck at it. People, it says here, don't you know you're able to do it every day? Don't know how you're able to do it every day and yet call yourself spiritual. It is said, never become part of someone else's karma. People who are commenting here on the name of support should be aware of this. Timesheets, but spreading hate and defaming other won't help your spiritual growth. In fact, it's creating a heavy karma for you. This person's obviously Indian. Have you ever been on the internet before? She's obviously one of these people that goes and argues and, tells everyone else what's wrong with them and expects that he's somehow able to judge people but criticizing people for doing the same. And he sucks at it. It's just one of these people who sees something on the most superficial level and didn't understand the video. And this is his reaction. But there's a second comment here. He continued on in a second comment. And that's why you don't see comments on heartfulness videos, because people who practice wholeheartedly and do not bother to comment, a lot of misspellings here, which you call criteria for being famous and right. No, I didn't. I was calling that criteria for the amount of comments per ratio of views. And when there's a live commenting section, when Dodgy does something live, there's lots of comments, right? And people love to comment. If you look at other, spiritual organizations that don't use bots, I think many of them do. But you look at Indian chat rooms and, the people who are the most, the most participation, the people who participate the most on my Facebook feed are Indian people. I had a lot of Indian friends from, doing Saj Marg, and they were the ones to post the most and comment the most and things like this. I mean, there's less a lot of chatter there. And so even if they just drop emoji, and so you make it sound like that people are too spiritual to comment, and that's not the case at all, right? It's that no one's watching his videos, and that's what I was saying. I wasn't saying because what you call a criteria of being famous, right? No, that's not what I said. That wasn't what I said at all. What I said was if you are buying bot views, you're not going to get comments on those views unless your bots are also commenting, and you can tell that kind of stuff. Nobody's watching his videos. What's the point? Language skills, grammar, high vocabulary is not criteria of spiritual elevation. If this is true, then what all the language do you know other than English, and how fluent are you at that? I don't even know what that means, right? I'm not claiming to be highly spiritually elevated, and I'm not saying that those things are the case. And I certainly don't speak any other language. If this was true, then how come people from the West were going to India, different spiritual masters who had little language skills? Your language you use is using to spread hate. I think the person is referencing me saying the difference between a Western mind and Eastern heart, and that's Babaji's definition. He said that people with Western minds have critical thinking skills, and it's less of a hive mind than you see with people in the Eastern countries, India specifically. That's Babaji's and Charji's definition. Charji was brilliant. Charji was certainly smarter than I am, and Babaji was, the most spiritual person probably ever. And so those are, I'm not diminishing the fact that India has been the centerpiece of the spiritual world. I went there and stayed there for 3.5 years, 3 years. And there's wonderful Indian people, saintly people. But I'm talking about Indians don't challenge authority. And the rest of the world does, so you can't expect the rest of the world to adhere to your culture just because there's a tradition of spirituality. If this was true, how come people come from the West to go to India to do different spiritual masters, have little language skills? You language you're using to spread hate. Propaganda, definitely post hateful stuff, and one who tries to become a master cannot accept the other. By separating yourself, you can become and act as a master. Charji never spoke ill about others. He never called Daji a liar. In fact, he gave Daji full freedom to act. You are spreading lies. You do not understand Charji correctly. You have fallen definitely. Every gathering you are creating such hateful videos when all of us are completely drunk in love and peace. You have time to create such videos during celebrations. And how have you monetized your channel because you don't work? And this is your earning? Question mark? um, so how long have you been watching my videos? I cover the birthday gatherings because Daji has wrecked the Mandaras. First he canceled them because of COVID. And he always was trying to cancel Charji's birthday. And this doesn't come just from me. This is coming from people from India who are at their wits' end. I'm going to read this other comment. And, I was told that he's trying to cut off resources to these other ashrams. Again, I don't have proof of this. This is just what people have said to me. But like the Chennai ashram, I talk about how they used to serve breakfast there, and people would go eat breakfast, go meditate, do the morning satsang at whatever it is, 7:30, eat breakfast and go to work. And it was a little bit social there. And it was kind of a neat thing, and, they had cheap food there, and it was good. But now he's not allowing them to serve food. That's what I've heard. I don't know. If someone else can verify that, I'm not there. But the point is, the gathering videos disappear. They don't stay up there forever, especially if he's made gas or done something. And I've been covering them since he's wrecked the gatherings. And so it's just what I do in terms of the Journey series. But how long have you been watching these videos, and why are you watching them? Like, what benefit do you have in these videos, right? Like, and you've got nothing out of them. You don't agree with it. You're not open to the possibility of change. I show you actual information. I show you things that he said, right? And, I showed you what Charji said in 2007 about people who say that you can progress in one sitting are liars. I showed you that clip. I mean, that's him calling Daji a liar because he said people who say that are liars, and Daji said that. So that's not me saying that. That's not propaganda or whatever. Anyways, so that was this dope. Anyways, there's one more kind of nonsensical comment. Well, Paul, there's a person, it's emoji with a frown and maybe somebody crying. Well, Paul, you seem to be totally confused. All your reasoning makes no sense, and he misspelled sense. When Indian makes a mark, West has to pull him down. Very sad. What do you mean by that? Do you think I represent the West and I'm pulling Daji down, right? Daji was a guy with 7 pharmacies, very successful, multimillionaire, and then Charji died, and he now has run that business into the ground. But apparently there is a scam going on with real estate. And I don't know this for sure, but this is something that was told to me by a few people, and I can't prove this. I have no access to this, and I don't really want to. I'm not working hard at this, right? It's people sending me things. I don't research this stuff anymore. If somebody sends me something, or sometimes I look at a YouTube video that YouTube recommends, but most of the time I just kind of want to move forward with my own thing. There's 16 videos in that playlist, and I mean, who's going to watch a couple of them are like one's 5 hours, another one's like 4 hours, and the rest are like 2 hours. So we're talking about 40 hours of content. And I already covered here in the Journey series. I mean, some of it's repetitive, and so it's for people who, I mean, do you need that much to convince you? Like, there's I know this from my my regular work with the sheeple and the dealing with sheeple, which we all know. There's no amount of evidence that you could submit to somebody who's unwilling to look at it with an open mind. And you guys know that I believe Dodgy was the valid successor of Chargy. It's been his work and his failure that has led me to believe what I believe here. And there are things that you can't excuse. And then I got this comment today. Hi, Paul. I came across your YouTube channel a couple of days ago, and it comes as a relief, comes as a great relief. Finally, my struggles with heartfulness seem to end watching you debunk so much. This comment came in right after the other comment, and it kind of indicates a lot here, right? In terms of what's going on with the actual people who've experienced this. I have lots to share, but I don't know how to reach you. I've been an Abhyasi since when I started, so 1993, so 31 years. I guess 31 years, over 30 years. And this person's been a preceptor for 15 years and has from India but lives in America. Chargy is central to my life and that of my family. He blessed my marriage, and my children were named by him. My family and I have been observing and witnessing. I just was telling my wife that he named Daji's kids Sahaj and Mark, right? And I met Sahaj, and he seemed like a really nice, like he just, he had a presence. He seemed like a, good guy and whatever. Back when Kamlesh was doing great, is being Chargy's successor, and he was giving good talks and, showed a lot of promise, like as being the next master. But he now has this thing called heartfulness, and they're trying to dismiss the Saj Marg name. And so, he has that, like he's living with that all the time. My family and I have been observing and witnessing a lot this organization, and also have been a victim to some vicious attacks. If you can throw some light on the dubious real estate deals in Kana and the shady people from North America, especially doctors, all white men mainly, who have been endorsing and promoting his book by interviewing him. I personally know of one who is an extortionist and has been banned by his state to practice as a doctor. So, I don't know any of this, but it sounds kind of about right based on what I've seen. I know of Abhyasis who have invested in real estate in Kana and are yet to get their monies back for field projects. There are a lot of skeletons. I just pray that the work and teachings of beloved Chargy and Babaji are not erased, and soon the world would realize the efficacy of our great Saj Marg system. Thank you, brother, once again for this work. And the same person wrote under assumed name. And it's similar stuff here. I'm going to read it. It's repetitive, but I'm going to read the whole thing. But there are two comments basically from the same person. So this is a person who just found my, the Gratefulness meditation videos, must be watching them, and then found my Pockets of Future Facebook page and sent me a message. And so the person says, "Hi, Paul. I came across your channel yesterday, and it has been such a relief in so many ways. You are managing to debunk the current status of SRCM, and I thank you for your service. I am not against anyone and hold no grudges. I have been an Abhyasi for 31 years and the stuff with Preceptor. I've been feeling extremely unsettled for a lot of things that are happening. I'm from India, North America. As Charles used to say, I try to live with an Eastern heart and Western mind." I already covered that in my video, and I talked about that in this comment. "My life has been touched by Chargy in many ways. I got married with blessed kids. Children were named. This stuff is repetitive. Every major decision in our lives has been taken only after his approval. That is how he took care of us. Lately, some developments that have been shocking for all of us: the extreme disregard for our fellow Abhyasis, the authoritarian behavior of almost everyone in power, and so on. There is actually nothing left. Certain behaviors of preceptors made by the current president may shock you. Anyways, that is not the point I wanted to make. They wouldn't shock me because, just wanted to let you know that if you possibly look into the real estate dealings of Kana I know many Abhyasis have invested huge money and still waiting to get their approval for Satkol for their homes. Satkol retreats have been transformed. Retreat has been transformed into a hotel. Recently, there's been investment. That's a real crime. Satkol is Charji. Had this thing about the Himalayas, and so he just had a desire to go to the Himalayas. And the first time I went to an ashram was in the Catskill Mountains, and there was an American guy. Him and his family went to India, and they went on a trip to Satkol. I went on a trip to the Himalayas to look for an ashram with Charji, and the guy had this he did a slideshow. So I'm 2 months into the system. Love it. This is like, it's just a great system. And this guy is showing this great slideshow, and they're all traveling through India. It's my kind of thing. As a little kid, I had a desire to be this guy Marlon Perkins. Some sort of a naturalist. It was Marlon Perkins, Mutual of Omaha, and I read. My education mostly came from my desire to know a lot about different kinds of wild animals. And I would, I had these encyclopedias at home, and I'd go to the library, and I would look up these animals, and I'd read all about them. Like I had a different favorite animal like every week. And, in terms of what I did in my own personal, quest for knowledge, that was about animals. And, when I was tested in fourth grade, I had like a 12th grade reading level just from reading those encyclopedias, right? And I wanted to be a naturalist. I want to go on adventures and safaris. And my dad promised to take me to Africa and India. We had this big attic, these huge closets, and there was these two topographical maps that my family had somehow gotten. I don't know why they had bought them. They were considered junk. Maybe they were left at the house when my parents purchased the house. But they were probably about 4 feet wide, and they were, hard plastic. And there was, the typographical means it's contoured with mountains. And tigers were, one of my favorite animals, and I always wanted to go on safari in Africa as well. And so I was interested in India and Africa from that standpoint. I used to sit on the maps when I was a kid and just study them, right? The rivers and the mountains and things. And so, it was just something that I was like into, right? And, so I had a fascination with that, right? Like my dad, he was always sick. He would get car sick and boat sick. My grandfather used to take us deep sea fishing. My grandfather was in 2 world wars, and he was kind of, my mom's dad. But my dad was, he couldn't travel. He'd get car sick on it, air sick and car sick and boat sick, And so he was just overweight. There's no way he was going to take me on a safari. My dad made promises he was never keep, right? But it was something that I always dreamed about. And so I saw this adventure. I was in this place in upstate New York with the Catskill Game Farm I went to when I was a kid. At this ashram was near there. And it's a just great, beautiful part of America. So I'm at this ashram, and I'm looking at this slideshow. And it says, he's showing these pictures of them going through the countryside in India. And there's a mountain that Krishna was supposedly picked up with his pinky, and they went by that mountain, and they stopped, and Charji was giving them group meditations as they traveled through rural India up to the Himalayas to look for property. And so Charji was really passionate about that. And the first time I went to India, I was supposed to meet Charji in Delhi and travel with him to the Himalayas. This was like 2 years later. He was still looking for property. But eventually found this property in Satkol, and everyone who went there said it was amazing. And really, I'm kind of bummed that I never got a chance to go there. And they made it into a silent retreat where there was very little, talking, and you were just focusing on your spiritual condition. And the atmosphere was just spectacular, right? And so they had another retreat center in like San Antonio or somewhere in near Austin, maybe. It was in Texas somewhere. And people went to that there, and they said it was phenomenal. They sold that. And this preceptor, Rob, wanted to quit the mission because of that, because he was so upset that they sold that retreat center. And now, I was told by this guy called the Dodgy Truther that Kamlesh is trying to minimize the condition. He's trying to keep people from going to Chennai because the spiritual condition is better there. And also the one in Satkol. And maybe one other ashram, I can't remember which one it is. But he's minimizing, he's cutting off resources. He's trying to get people not to go to those places because old timers don't want to go to Kana because it's too much of a carnival kind of hotel wellness center, and it's not this other thing, right? And so this person saying these doctors that he's cultivating relationships with. I saw that one interview with that one guy, but I don't know about these other people he's talking about. But it sounds just about right. Recently, there was an advertisement for homes for leasing purposes, wishing Kana purpose leasing purposes, wishing Kana. People have signed up for it. Were asked to cough up to $80,000 in a short span of time, and many withdrew looking at this demand. Kana is now becoming a real estate hub, with many of the inner circle members holding the reins of those companies. We saw somebody else sent me this and said there's just all this real estate and things going up there. Remember, he was partnering with Diaper Baba to build some sort of luxury apartments there for wellness, all this stuff, right? And it's, everything with Dodgy has to be considered a scam because of the brighter minds thing. The second part is Heartfulness going after doctors in the U.S. If you look at the people who were invited to interview Dodgy for the new book, 90% of them were white doctors from Harvard and Stanford. I personally know of one of them, and he doesn't have anything good to say about Heartfulness or Dodgy. He is famous for extortion, has lawsuits and cases against him from medical counsel in his state in the U.S., and really has no clue about anything that is spiritual. It is shocking and it makes me sad. I say this because my family has been nurtured by Chargy and this noble and pious system of Saj Marg. In our whole soul, we have become like zombies, clueless, not knowing what to do, shocked and silent, only tears rolling down in Chargy's remembrance. Like I said, I have no agenda to defame or go against anyone, but I know that things are absolutely in the wrong direction and we are helpless. Do you know that Dodgy has withdrawn his status of president from the Canadian board? I wonder why. I sent this stuff to my wife, and I didn't get to read all of this second one. And she asked me about this. I saw the Canadian board thing, though. And, in every country, Babaji made these official organizations. He registered with the government in every country because he didn't want some fly-by-night thing that people were going to consider a cult. And people in Europe pushed back. And Babaji gave a brilliant answer because they didn't like organized religion. And so one European young man said to Babaji, why do you want this to be an organization? Why do you want to, register this as an organization? And Babaji said, because I don't want disorganization, right? But each of these countries has rules and bylaws. Like in America, Chargy had to have a meeting every year. And he would come to America and, travel here, and that would be at the official gathering. There would be a, kind of an open forum where they'd have a meeting of the, whatever, right, official meeting, whatever the criteria was. And if he couldn't come here, they would do it by, sometimes Chargy would show up via video, or there was one time he had the official gathering in India. I'm not sure if that was, I don't know if it had to be in America. But anyways, there was these rules and criteria for these organizations. And apparently this person's saying that Dodgy is no longer on the Canadian board and says, I wonder why. The internet is flooded with people running study groups, YouTube classes on points, yatra, different types of cleansing, and so on. It's so cringe. I am looking for the video and will send it to you if you find it. If in the video, Dodgy talks about the nun disease, where in the 18th century or so, nuns are serving during wartime were found to develop breast cancer. Dodgy blatantly mentioned in the video that reason behind this was because the nuns were suppressing their sexual desires. Well, that's kind of creepy. And I and many others were shocked, angry, and extremely saddened to hear such stereotyping. When I Googled it, it listed many reasons for that syndrome, but it never brought this up, brought his point up. In another speech, he talks low about people who are worship the Shivling. I don't want to get into the details, but it was another totally cringeworthy statement. This must stop, but I don't know how it would happen. The few men around him are evil personified, and they control pretty much everything. Sadly, most are from this continent. Thank you, Paul, for your service and yes, as Chargie's disciple, and having been in Sajmarg for most part of my life. I think it's our duty in some way to bring back the beautiful system and restore its efficacy. I'm yet to watch all of your videos. I want to throw some light on the vestibules Daji brought in, the points C and D and so on. I realize from your video that the golden liquid technique is a sure bogus technique. What about the vestibules? Chargy never spoke of this. I'm not sure what the vestibules are. I'm not aware of as much stuff. I don't see everything Daji puts out, but that's all, very disturbing. All right, so I've done a lot of content today. I don't want to overtax my voice, so I'll probably comment on this more tomorrow. A lot of stuff there, right? Again, stuff I can't prove personally. And I don't want to. Like, I'm just, at this point, it's all believable because these guys are capable of all kinds of horrible things. The people running the system, Chargy has said they have the worst character qualities. These were the people that were around Chargy's inner circle that have taken a stranglehold to the mission, with Daji, and they're running it into the ground and turning it into something completely different than it actually is. And, they don't realize it's failing. Like, there's a thing that attracts you to, there was a comment here. Let me find this one comment. Here are two comments I want to read from that. There's one here. I was open to this method of teaching after hearing about it from Paul. I tried to contact a local preceptor, but no luck. And then Daji was such a turnoff. I could see right through him. But seeing Chargy here, I understand what you were attracted to him and his teaching. He's obviously everything Daji is not. It is not something I can explain. It's just there. Peace, brother. A lot of people couldn't find preceptors. There was one young woman, she was like from Australia, but she was staying in America, and she tried to find a preceptor, and they gave her a preceptor that she was like going to school, and, they gave her a preceptor that's 2 states away, big states, like Midwestern states, in a place that had a big city. It was like Chicago or something, that had plenty of preceptors. And she couldn't get a preceptor. This other people, I had a number of people who used the app, and they couldn't find a preceptor. And, I'm kind of glad that they didn't now with everything that's happened. I guess, the way that this system's being run. There was this other comment. This was from an Abiyasi who found my videos and left some other comments. We can all disagree with Paul and his ideas, but there's no point in trying to demean or put him down through your comments. He has all the right to express himself and lay out his thoughts. If you don't agree, then just don't watch his videos. In fact, I don't agree with everything he says, but when I really sit down and think about certain topics he mentions, it all makes sense, and I find certain points he makes very valid. At times I find certain details that I have overlooked completely, but when he dissects things deeply, I feel so foolish for not having noticed them myself, even when they were so evident, and that's really sad. Since it's a fact he's pointed out, it makes perfect sense. If you don't like the content, then just refrain from watching the videos, but frankly, just sit down and think about so many points he makes, especially the one about throwing Chargy under the bus. Doesn't that make your heart cry out loud if you really love Chargy and how he's being sidelined nowadays? This is one thing that just thinking about it makes me weep profusely. And right below that, eat more pills, Coblish. The person spells the name wrong. It's either true or it's not. Like I say this about everything that I cover. Something's either true or it's not. And if it's true, here's another person here. If I may share my first red flag with Daji, I was watching the YouTube video when they came to Washington for some sort of conference. I remember vividly 2 Indian women promoting the Brighter Minds scam and guilt-tripping parents and their children. Yeah, I showed that. And the woman was saying, do you love your children? Like, that was how she presented it, right? Do you love your children? Then you should do this thing. I was disgusted and squished my face with disbelief. At the moment the camera turned over to Daji, he had the biggest smile on his face with a look of contentment and approval of this terrible thing. He then realized the camera was on him, and he immediately switched his face to his usually blank expression, showing how ingenuine and false he is. I don't forget the disappointment I felt and the respect I had for Paul for speaking out about this, it reaffirmed the trust and respect I had for him. Again, like I'm okay, whatever it is. But this is a slam dunk. Like I cover things that are less, are less easy to prove or less easy. They're less obvious. Dodgy has made this completely obvious, and he didn't have to. They're so arrogant, right? These guys are so they're so oblivious to what other people see and believe, and they don't believe in the Sajmark teachings. And so, they trampled on these things back when I experienced this with the UN thing, when they joined the UN, which I discussed earlier in this video. But the only reason to be upset about it if it was true, right? Because if it wasn't true, you'd be like, there's always going to be critics. Chargy had haters, Babaji had haters. There's all that stuff. Everyone has haters, right? Every public figure has people, disgruntled people, whatever. And you could easily dismiss it. You could dismiss somebody like me, right? But it isn't just me, because almost all the information I'm showing you is sent to me by other people. It was brought to my attention by other people. Like I had no way of accessing this information. And so people who are Abhyasis are freaked out by this. And, this is, some of them I just read comments, new people are showing up. And a lot of people see what I see. There's, how can you not? And so, it's just going to keep on going. And these guys who are running the mission, they're so self-destructive. Like they don't know how like big losers they are. And they could have done this with anything else. These are rich millionaire businessmen. They didn't have to bring this thing down. They were all wealthy, based in Chargy, propping them up. Chargy said to these clowns, Babaji gave you better jobs than you deserve. Your wealth comes from Babaji. Your wealth comes from your association with me. He didn't, say that, but when Chargy was alive, all these people flourished, and then they're taking what he built and they're going to ruin it after sitting by his feet in his cottage for years and pretending to be disciples, right? I mean, you're the scum of the earth, right? You could have taken anything down. There's so much corruption out there. There's so many ways to make money. There's so many ways to run your scams. And you had to bring it here. You had to bring it into Sajmark. I mean, it's, it's shameful behavior. I'm not a shame person. I don't say shame on you, these things. I don't like this, I don't care. I know people suck. I've seen the degradation. I worked as a counselor with sex offenders, right? People are the bottom of the barrel. And so, and I've seen this. I cover this stuff on a daily basis on my regular videos. The degradation and the scumbaggery and the skullduggery and all the low-level behavior that people exhibit. I've seen it. It sucks. But I'm aware of it, right? It's a cesspool. But you didn't have to bring it here. You didn't have to contaminate Sajmark. Maybe this is part of a plan, like I said, there's nothing I can do about it. But you've wrecked the mission. You've wrecked something that many of us believe in. And, we're not cool with it, right? You might think you've gotten away with it, but, you're talking about karma, right? Talking about samskaras. This is, you ain't escaping this. Like whatever, you might have been, there's souls that come down to be the enemy of the master. But in the brighter world, they work together. Krishna had, one guy who, it was a soul associated with Vishnu, the cosmic functionary of God or preservation. And this soul, Vishnu said, you can come down 10 times as my friend or 3 times as my enemy. And the soul didn't want to come to earth at all, so he said, all right, I'll come down 3 times as your enemy. So in the Mahabharata, he was Shishupal, and he was killed. It was his 3rd life. And Shishupal was the son of somebody who loved Krishna. His mom loved Krishna, but he hated Krishna. And he was always insulting Krishna. And Krishna said, I'll bear 100 of your insults. You can insult me 100 times, and that's it. And he was on 97. And he showed up at like this hall, where the Pandavas, the good guys were. And Shishupal starts in on Krishna. Krishna looks at him and goes, today is your day, Shishupal. And Shishupal goes and gives him 3 more insults and 4 more insults, and he breaks the 100. He gives him the 100 and goes to the 100 first. And Krishna takes out his disc. He had this disc he had, like some kind of a, this powerful object, and he cuts off his head. And he was liberated, right? The soul was liberated because he was, a friend of Vishnu. An enemy of Krishna, but a friend of Vishnu. and every person that Krishna kills gets liberated. There's a funny time where I was in, I think, America, and Chargy was giving a talk, and a fly was buzzing around him, and he said, "This fellow wants liberation." Like if Chargy killed him, he would get liberated, right? But anyways, there's that. Like, so I don't know what these guys are. It's all above my pay grade to that extent. But I can say that for what we see, they've wrecked what was. What was great, what was a great mission led by a great man, is now just a cesspool and an embarrassing, incompetent, run, bungling idiots, right? you know. Anyways, I got to wrap this up. I'll continue on the next couple of days. Okay, so this is the video I made this morning that's up on my other channel. This is entitled, let me get the correct title here. This is entitled, trying to find where I'm uploading here. Why Kamlesh's lies have brought everyone down with him. Again, the links are in the description box for people who want to check out that channel. And if you've already seen the video, when it returns to the picture of the osprey, so the video features a picture of Bryce Canyon. That's Bryce Canyon. Bryce Canyon, if I ever go back to Utah area, Arizona, and my family and I, and my wife, when we were just first meeting, she traveled out there, and we went to all these different places. And there's wonderful places. The number one place for me would be Bryce. That was probably my favorite place out of all of them. And they're all wonderful. Better than Zion. We lived close to Zion Canyon. Zion was cool. Grand Canyon, of course, is great. It's the Grand Canyon. But Bryce is my favorite. But anyways, you'll see the picture of Bryce Canyon will become this picture of the osprey. And that's how you'll know that that video's over. So here it is. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is a standalone video on the exposing the Heartfulness cult, dodgy, whatever it is, hoax channel. This channel here, exposing the Heartfulness cult dodgy scam. This is a channel where I have a lot of stuff that is basically journey series stuff. And one of the people who watch my videos, who I believe is an Abhyasi, sent me this video, left a link for this video. And it is called Reverend Chargy's Vandordara 2007 tour. And it's from the Sajmark YouTube channel that puts up these videos. And that person who's running the channel is aware of Dodgy being a liar and a scammer. And so let me switch over to my voiceover here. So this is a video from 2007, and he uses the term wake up over and over again. And he starts off by saying this is a talk about what you shouldn't do, or what you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, or what you're not doing that you should be doing. And it's to people in the Gujarat state, which is where Kamlesh is from. And this is when Ajay, the guy who was nominated first, was still is being prepared as Chargy's successor, and he's there with Chargy, and you can see him in the video. And at some point he mentions Kamlesh Bai, which is Dodgy Kamlesh, and he says that all these buildings, all these ashrams that Kamlesh Bai is building here will be nothing more than memorials, as long as you guys don't wake up. And so that's at that area right here, the 10-minute mark. It's about 9 something in to the video, like it's the beginning of the talk. It shows him touring the area up to that, the first 10 minutes. And Kamlesh Bai was what we were instructed to call Kamlesh when he was nominated as the successor to Chargy. Like, he just had to be something else, right? Because I'm not sure where the term Lalaji came from, but Babaji was a clerk or a babu. So that was his job, a babu. Babu, and they added the G. Charji is Parthasarthi Rajagopalachari, and so that is not a great name to add the G to, right? But he was affectionately known as Chari to his family and friends, so everyone called him Chari. And well, maybe I don't know, maybe not his family because they all were named that. I don't know, but that was his nickname, Chari. And so they just added the G. The G is a term of like it's an elder thing, whatever. Like Chargy once joked to me and he called me Romano G, just as a goof. I don't know what it was, but that's how I took it. And Kamlesh G doesn't really work. I guess it could work. I don't know. But at some point, Dodgy just started to call himself Dodgy. He said, "Don't call me Master, call me Dodgy." I don't know. Now they're calling him Master, and he kind of likes it. I don't know what's going on with him, his name. But we were told to call him Kamlesh Bai, and I thought that started in 2011. But Chargy calls him Kamlesh Bai here, and apparently Kamlesh was, Kamlesh made a lot of money, so they must have been building some like ashram-like buildings there in Gujarati, Kamlesh's home state. And he used the term "wake up." Now, the "wake up" term, the only other time I heard it used in the Sajmark tradition was the day it was September 9th, 2001, and Babaji was addressing the events that happened in New York City, and he said, "Wake up if you're not already awakened." And so that was to me the beginning of the truth movement. That's that's when the truth movement started. The truther stuff. But he says "wake up" numerous times in this video, which I found very interesting. And the video is all about how people there in Gujarati are obsessed with making money. Now, when I first was mentioning this in the Journey series, there was a woman who showed up and she really hated Kamlesh. And part of it was his caste. And I didn't feel so comfortable with that, because in India there are certain castes that are considered potential gurus, potential spiritual people. And of course, Brahmins, where Charji was. Like, Charji brought in the most people just by being Brahmin and just having his, of course, he was great at all he did, but, the fact that there were so many people in southern India, the Brahmins are often teachers, professors, gurus, doctors, there's a lot of, they're usually educated. I met there was this family. There's these two, they were a little bit older than my kids, but really neat kids, really neat people. And there was a sister and a brother. The sister was older than the brother. And the dad became known as Toad 2, that was referenced in some of my earlier Journey series videos. And Toad 2 is now part of the Forest by Heartfulness. We went to stay with Toad 2, and he was a real jerk. He kept on wanting us to come to his house. And then when the flood happened, we were in his area, so I, found a way to contact him, and he invited us over to his house. He had a nice house because he was a professor at this, this university that was, it was about trees, I don't know exactly the title of the university, but it was about, nature and things like this, where they studied whatever the study of trees is. And, don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. I could look it up. And it's probably a different word in India anyway that they were using. But he turned out to be a horrible host. And, my kids were suffering, were sick, and we were just coming back from the flood. And we went back to the ashram that was there in Bangalore. But his kids were neat. And his one son was, I was talking to his son. His son was funny. Like, he was just one of those kids who was just, he was naturally funny. And he said that his dad wanted him to do Saj Marg. And he said he wasn't ready. And he said, "Well, until you do it, you're not my son." He goes, "So for 6 months, I wasn't his son." I'm like, your dad sounds like a real jerk, and he was. And the kid was saying that he was having to lie about being a Brahmin. Like, he was going overseas to study something or other, for his master's degree or something. But he was in this program, and he had to lie about being Brahmin because their system of, what do they call that system? In America, it's called affirmative action. Um, but in India, in America, that's to give, black people an advantage because culturally and systemically they have a disadvantage, which I agree with. I don't know if affirmative action works, though. And in India, it's to do with the caste system. And to be a Brahmin and, the way that they had game the system, he said he had to score almost like a perfect score on a test compared to other people who are in other castes. So he had to lie about his caste, even though being a Brahmin is a good, so whatever. So they have all these advantages, or they're seen as having just based on, how they're raised to be academics and gurus and things like that. Northern India, Babaji was in a warrior caste. Shah Jahanpur is in a, state kind of near Delhi at the border where there was a lot of Muslim people there and a lot of warriors because there was invaders from the north, right? All these various, like, Genghis Khan and these raiders and these, Attila the Hun, these kind of people would come in from the north. And so they developed like a warrior caste up there. And Babaji was part of that caste. And his caste was not considered a caste where gurus came from. And Lalaji, I think, was part of the same caste. They were in a neighboring village. And so Lalaji and Babaji, there was some spirituality there, and there were some Sufi saints. Sufism is a part of the like the Muslim tradition, but it's the spiritual aspect of it, and there's transmission that's given in the Sajmark system that's from Sufism. Like that's it's also exists in ancient Hinduism, but Sufism, all religions are based in Hinduism. Like that's where the soul was discovered. And so there was a time where India dominated the world, and there was a religion or whatever you want to call what they were doing, and the people all around that area and beyond did that stuff, did the some kind of form of Hinduism, and then these other religions came from that, and it's again it's where the soul was discovered, the first idea of a soul, and so that's why a lot of those countries in the East believe in reincarnation and things like that. Like a lot of the things like martial arts, there was this villain named Ravana who was he kidnapped Rama's wife. Rama was an incarnation of Vishnu. He was the same soul as Krishna. And they had this war in what's now Sri Lanka. And we were told by this guy who did like a form of acupuncture that Ravana invented acupuncture and invented martial arts, 100,000 years ago. Even though he was a villain, like considered a villain in the book, he was an innovator and he had invented these things, right? So that was interesting. And so a lot of these things came from ancient India that we do now, a lot of inventions and things. Back when India was sort of the center of the world in the sense of the, I want to say dominant because it was not as much as militaristic as sophistication, but now India is just a pit. But so those names that they got, Babaji, Lalaji, Charji, these were in the region that they're from. But Daji comes from a region where they all make money, right? His last name's Patel, and there's a saying, motel, hotel, patel. And so they're known as being, business oriented and, money-making people. Like they're very money-making, you could say that they're the blank, if you're thinking about people who are known for being moneyed people, the blank of, Indians, right? India has that kind of, some of the Indians have that kind of sort of, stereotypical for other people who are known stereotypically for making money, right? And Charji sets in on him, like people, and he says, you're never going to be spiritual as long as you're so focused on making money. You're not going to be able to do this because you're obsessed with money and making money and You can't. I mean, and Chargy was a rich person surrounded by rich people that he helped prop up in their businesses, and the mission needed money. So he was not anti-money, and he was not anti-material success. But there are times he told people. There's one guy who owned a hotel, and I don't know what region that guy came, but he was always friends with Kamlish, so I think they might have been from the same region. Him and Kamlish had gone on trips together to Africa, and this guy was a secretary of the mission, and he did a lot of good work financially to set up ashrams and things. And he once, Chargy once said to him, "Stop making money. Like, just stop. You made enough." This guy, I went to his house. He had one of those McMansions in a cul-de-sac, one of those big, giant, $1 million houses, and he had done financially well. And Chargy said, "Just stop making money and just focus on being spiritual." And the guy didn't listen, and he went to expand his hotel, and the thing burned down, or whatever it was. I don't know the exact details of the story, but this woman who wrote comments was very disparaging of these people in Gujarati, and said that they're just known for being just scumbags and whatever. Now there was a family, the first kid who did the Brighter Minds scam. We were friends with their mom and dad, and I liked the dad. We talked, occasionally. I had bought some. The dad used to sell like chairs and stuff, like folding chairs that people would use to sit, like he had ran a business outside the ashram that helped people with stuff for the ashram. But there was another guy, an English guy, a guy who he seemed to be a little bit sleazy, but he was the kind of guy you would go to. Like he was they have these things called dongles where you get it plugs into your computer with a USB drive, and it would connect to the internet. And he had all kinds of things like that. Like he charged a higher rate. Like we eventually found at better prices. But this was an English guy living in India, and he was a little bit kind of gross. I don't know, like how to put it, but he was kind of sleazy a little bit. He had been there for a number of years. He eventually got kicked out of India when everyone was getting kicked out. But he had he had one of these flats in Garden of Hearts. Chargy built these buildings, this these apartment buildings in Garden of Hearts back in the, I would say, early 90s, maybe, or when I started. They were there, I think. They had just been built, 93. It was an apartment building called Garden of Hearts, and it was right across from the ashram. And a lot of Westerners bought apartments there. They were like 10 grand something. They're worth probably 200 now or more. So they really appreciated because there was all these, there was nothing there when Chargy built the ashram, but now there's all these call centers, and it's a very kind of wealthy, affluent area. And when Chargy built it, was nothing but a floodplain that people said, why are you buying this land? It did flood out, so there was that, but it increased in value, became a very valuable area. This guy and this other guy, this Indian guy who was from Gujarati, his son was the first Brighter Minds person, his son that introduced Dodgy to the midbrain activation scam. And they hated each other because they were in business, like they did an eyeglass business together. And there was some kind of dispute. And, I once in a while talk to the English guy, but I was kind of friends with the Indian guy. But, they both were like accusing each other of doing like bad business, right? And so there was that. And there was a crazy guy, and the Gujarati guy took care of this crazy guy from Canada, the guy who really hated Dodgy. And the crazy guy had married an Indian woman who died, and he never lived with her. Like, it was a weird marriage. And he was crazy. Like, I saw the guy in an American gathering in Atlanta. And I was walking. It was a day out. It was Chargy had just left, and everyone was gone. And I was there. I was there an extra day to help, like, take down some of the tents and stuff like that, the ashram. And the energy of the gathering wasn't as good as it was. And, you could feel the gathering had been such like the energy that Chargy brought. I mean, the ashram itself had good energy on its own. with the energy that Chargy brought, and then the gathering, it was just, I wouldn't say it felt sad, but it wasn't as good as it was. And I was walking to where the big meditation tent is. Like there's the ashram there in Molina has just a like a mountaintop. It's the top of a hill. It's like 400 feet, and it at the top of it they had built the master's quarters and a dining area, and then there was a flat area they put up a tent that we would go and meditate in. And this guy was walking back, and he just crumbled and started to cry, like just as I walked by him, like in a way like I was supposed to interact and I didn't know. And I was like, well, and he was it's just too much, and he started saying stuff, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do. So like years later, he was living as an inmate. He was the only like white person that lived as an inmate, only European American type, person that lived as anybody who wasn't Indian. I think he was the only non-Indian that lived as an inmate. Sharji let him live at the ashram because I think he was crazy. And he had this rock garden, and he would just remake the rock garden over and over again. Like it was nice what he did, but he was constantly working on it. And that was his contribution. Then he lived at the ashram, and I had a number of conversations with him. And he said, what happens to all the stuff that we clean out? We do a cleaning, a half-hour cleaning, and you do your cleaning every night. And then, of course, the cleaning at sittings. And he said, at the ashram, in his room, every morning, there was just like stuff like dust on the floor. It wasn't dust, it was something, he couldn't figure out what it was. And he said, like, I don't know if this stuff is anywhere else. And I think it's the material, when the cleaning stuff happens, Chargy didn't say what he did with the stuff that cleaned out of you. It's used for something, right? But this guy, he thought it was this stuff that, he had some interesting theories, but he was definitely crazy. Like and one day he just sat in on Kamlesh, and we were sitting at the cafe, and he was like, oh my God, the Kamlesh is horrible. I don't know why and I was like, oh, this sucks. He was loud, and everyone was hearing him. I was sitting at the table with him, but he turned out to be right. And so this guy married an Indian woman, and they had a house. She had some kind of house that was given to her by family. And he had the house, but he didn't want to live at the house. He wanted to live at the ashram. And so he rented it. And this guy from Gujarati was, in charge of it. And he kind of was telling me about the arrangement, and it was definitely good for him. Because this guy the Canadian guy just wanted so much money. Like it was a minimal amount of money from the rent, and the other guy just would run it for him, and took the rest of the money, and he was doing pretty well. But this guy also took care of this guy, and he eventually helped him get citizenship. And he told me the Gujarati guy was telling me about how he was being interviewed for citizenship, and he was like his thing was being a spiritual seeker. And the guy just delivered. He was being interviewed by this, bureaucrat, and to become a citizen. And, because he had married an Indian woman, and he had been in India for a while, and he had some of the criteria. And he just, came through, like, because he had his moments where he was just crazy. But he came through. The guy said, I couldn't believe he was giving such lucid answers to the woman, right? Like he had these moments, and it was all because, he was the one person that sort of survived. I don't know what happened to the guy. But, so this guy was running this, and he would usually rent the house to Russian people, would pay a lot of money, and he was making money. So they were money-making people. But, there was this family had some level of, I liked the guy. I mean, I thought he was a good guy. But, there was a money-making aspect to it. The mom, less so. But the kid was very much sort of, the kid that went and did the Brighter Mind, did the midbrain activation scam. And he's the kid that showed it to Dodgy. Like the kid showed him that he was reading with his feet, with a blindfold. And Dodgy was impressed. And, he believed it at that point, I think. Either he saw it as a scam or whatever. But so Chargie's talking to these people, and he's saying, wake up over and over again. Stop, being slaves to money power. He didn't use the term money power, but that's what, that in terms of the Babaji whispers, that's what Chargy was saying. It was interesting listening to it because there had been, some, disparaging of the Gujarati people. And, I was thinking about this. Like, Kamlesh is a liar, and he is known as being a liar. And so back, I've told this story before, but, when I was trying to figure out whether I could bring my kids to Kamlesh's birthday because he made this stupid rule about no kids. And it was just my one son. Like, the other three were old enough, they were Abiyasis. And so, it was a rule that would later disappear. It was a stupid rule, and it put me and other people through a lot of stress. I mean, me particularly, probably me more than anybody else, because other people just kind of tried to disobey the rule, or they dumped their kids off at the other ashram, and they didn't, they didn't care. They just went to the gathering, did what they were going to do anyway. But I was like, I always wanted to follow the rules. And so it put me through a lot of unnecessary stress. Of course, I was kicked out of the gathering. But I went to this German woman for a sitting. Her husband and her were both doctors. Really nice. Didn't know the husband that well, but he just seemed really nice. And the kids seemed like good kids. They had kids that hung out with my kids. And I was asking her what she was going to do. And she said, well, we were sitting there, a bunch of us, and Kamlesh was telling us how he, when he was supposed to go to the gatherings, he would stay back and watch his kids and just let his wife go to the big bandaras, the big gatherings. But she said all of us were talking afterwards, and we all saw him at the gatherings. We all saw him with Charji, and they never saw his wife, right? And she was saying he's a liar. Like, this is him as master. And the people there, these are all senior preceptors, people who this is a big deal to. They were living in India and sending their kids to the Lalaji Memorial Omega School that Charji had built. And this was an important thing. This woman hated her country, Germany. She said, like, I go back and they're like all robots there. And she'd been living in, India now for a while with her family. And so he was known as a liar then. Like, he had said things and, believing his own lies, right? And there was an expectation that you wouldn't call him out on his lies because he was the master that to be. But you can't have a master that lies. I mean, you can't. Like, you can't lie and be a guru, right? And so there was a comment exchange, and I put a comment. I read it in one of these, videos. I think that's now deleted, but I don't know. Some of them don't have any content in it, so I got to go through all those videos and post them here. Post them here for the list, but also this video is also going to be, like I said, part of the Journey series number 140. But there's an exchange on the Sajmark channel to a video I posted. And so the people watch my videos ended up commenting there, and there was an exchange. And then I talked to, and the guy who runs the Sajmark channel was basically saying that they're like Chargie's birthday getting canceled. He didn't say that specifically, but he said that, and he didn't use Daji's name, but he was saying, we all knew what he was saying, that Daji goes in and just says he's getting a whispers message, but there's no validation of the message, right? There's no way to say that, oh my God, this is a real message. There's no message and no, like I said before, for years he went and bothered Madame Malin to be his, to talk to Babaji for him. But now all of a sudden he's talking to Babaji himself, right? Like, it seems really suspect. If he was a medium, he would have been able to talk to Babaji the whole time, especially since he said that the divine hierarchy, Babaji particularly, was preparing him without Charji knowing the secret. That epic talk that he gave when he was supposed to be announcing Charji's final resting place, and he was talking about how bad Charji was and how great he was. And so why weren't you channeling then? How did you know you were being worked on by Babaji if you weren't behind Charji's back? Like what, And the whole thing is, he just lies, right? And when you lie about things like that, and he lied to me about things, he faked read my condition. And there was other stories. There was that story that I told you about, these two senior preceptors. One of them's the guy that Charji said, I think one of them was the guy that Charji said, stop making money. And they came to him and said, oh, we're so gross, can you give us a cleaning? And they had just seen Charji, so they weren't gross, they were clean. They had come back from India. But he gave him a sitting, and they said, were we gross afterwards? And he said, they were screwing with him because he was so, anal about his spiritual condition. Like, he would say, oh, when you give me a sitting, don't touch this point and don't touch this center and be careful about this. And, he was kind of goofy about the points and they didn't like it. Like he was a part of this inner circle, and this is something they didn't like about him, and so they were screwing with him. And they said they were gross when they weren't. And they said, did you give a sitting? When he was giving a sitting, you said we were gross. He goes, oh, you guys are so gross, but I cleaned you. And they said, no, we weren't. We met from charge. And he said, oh, yeah, I didn't read you. And so that he didn't do the reading. So he just made it up, which, the whole story's effed up. But that story was told to me by my brother, before Kamlesh was nominated. Like there was this element of, there's this jealousy and sort of all these people who were around Chargy, they all had like their little attitudes about each other, right? But Kamlesh is known as a liar. He told lies. Multiple people had said that to me in some way, and that's how he was known as a person. So as master, he's going to have to get rid of that. You can't be a liar. Like you got to be somebody who's trustworthy, right? Chargy would like bait people. Like he told this guy who's a doctor, allopathic medicine sucks and you're a fraud. But he was provoking the guy. He was an arrogant doctor. This doctor told this story. He was provoking him to get cleaned out, right? So there's things like that. But telling out and out lies to embellish or to brag, you just really can't do. And, even small ones like, because people aren't going to trust you. Like everybody lies, and that's understandable. But when people lie, in a way to get an advantage, or they take advantage of people, or they take advantage of their position and their power, or they do something like say, Kamlesh saying, you guys should stay home with your kids because I used to stay home with my kids, and I became master. And then everyone said, no, you didn't stay home with your kids. You're lying about that. Like, that's bad. Because he's making an arbitrary rule that he ends up having to reverse because it's a stupid rule. And he lies about it. And so, and I knew about, like, he was somebody who you couldn't trust him to tell you the truth, right? Which is hard to trust. Trust is built on people being able to, be trustworthy in terms of their whether they tell the truth. And I think he kind of believed he stayed at home. And like he would tell these lies and it wasn't based in fact. And then he would believe his own lies. Like that's how I felt about it. Like if you confronted with him, like he would not know what to do because he kind of believed this stuff, but if you showed him evidence like I'm doing here, right? And so he's known as a liar. And, I made this video that's now deleted, but there's a old talk of Chargy that somebody sent me from this, Sajmark channel. And in the talk, Chargy says that he says that anybody who tells you that you can progress, in like a sitting, go from, any significant spiritual progress, never mind from point 1 to point 13, is a liar. If you believe him, you're gullible. And then Daji came out and said this very same thing. So, Chargy was calling him a liar. And even in this other video, he's there in this area talking about give up their obsession with money making. And then all of its status probably, wake up is what he said. You guys got to wake up. Which is interesting because I never heard him say that before, anybody. That he was telling people to wake up. And he said it like probably at least 3 or 4 times in the talk. He kept on saying, wake up. And so, he mentioned Kamlesh by name, but Kamlesh by name. And, it was his area. And then this was before Kamlesh was nominated. This was in 2007. Remember, in 2011 is when he was nominated as his successor. So there's all that, right? But, then Kamlesh told this story, going back to what Chargy said about somebody saying you're going from point 1 to point 13. Kamlesh told this story where he said these women were, he told one story in the interview, and there was, quite a many, there's a difference between them drinking tea and coffee, a difference between him being in a car or being in his office, a difference between them experiencing several jerks. And he didn't come out and say they were in the central region. He just said, whatever it was, they had this moment of grace in his book. But in this interview, he said they went from point 1 to point 13 in a fraction of a second. And I showed you the clip of Daji in the interview, and I showed all these other things, right? It's possible I can upload that video because I don't know that has anything in it from Heartfulness. And then the stuff from his book. That he, so he told one story in the book, one story in the interview. And so he's just, that's lying. Like he's lying about this. And nobody really, I mean, I was sent this where the dodgy truther guy, is part of this group, and they share this information. They're all coming up with things where Dodgy's saying things that they don't believe or, whatever. That are, there's things that he shouldn't be doing as master. And there's a bunch of people in India, thousands of them, that are feeling this way. And they're talking about it, right? Even though they're being suppressed by the organization itself, they're talking about amongst themselves. And none of those people believed, I told my wife about it, who, is relatively new to doing the practice. She was like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, no one would believe that you could go to 1 to 13 in a fraction of a second. It's stupid. It's just another way he's just bragging and being stupid. And he's really, when he's in the interview, he's so proud about it. Like, and it's just like, you're lying. Like, do you know you're lying? You're lying and we can see through your lies. And so when he's told about the Brighter Mind scam back when it was the midbrain app, the midbrain activation, and I just copied the most recent. It had this kid now as a grown man, the kid who told him about it, and they were presenting for this woman who was in charge of the British Commonwealth and the guy from Transcendental Meditation, Tony Nader, and this other guy, some Indian actor and model that were there, and they were doing this big thing for Swami Vivekananda's anniversary birth thing, and they brought in these kids to the Brighter Mind scam, and the kids kept on talking about how you could only be between ages 5 and 15, and the reason for that is that when you're 15, 16 years old, when you get older than 15, they say it's because your brain matures and you're into puberty, but lots of kids go into puberty now at 10, 11 years old. And so it has nothing to do with that. Your brain does change, but not in a way. And the kid's talking about it like, they're explaining it to the audience, and he's saying your left brain and your right brain, but it's the hemispheres. And they do these finger exercises that are supposed to balance the hemispheres. And there's lots of things out there that can help coordinate your hemispheres of your brain. Those are real things. But those things are just goofy exercises that, they do something. They don't let you smell colors, right? But the reason that they limit it to 15-year-olds, because, and it's a little bit iffy, for the teenagers. The younger kids will do it, and they'll just believe that they're doing it even though they know they're seeing through the blindfold. Like they won't make that connection that they're actually lying. And maybe later when they get older, they'll realize it, right? And they should start feeling guilty about it, or, have some, feeling like a fraud. And I don't know these, whatever happens with these kids. But, when you get older, you're like, well, I'm looking through the blindfold. I can't smell the colors. It's not working, right? So they can't do it with adults because adults would call BS on it, right? But, this is why the scam worked. And that's how it worked. The midbrain activation scam worked before they presented it to Dodgy. This kid did. So the kid went and faked like he read with his feet. And he comes from this region, this Gujarati region. And, there's just this, the scumbaggery that's associated with it, right? Money-making people. And Dodgy either knows it's a fraud, but sees it's something that he can make money on right away, or he gets duped. And I think he got duped. And he started to do it he started to find out about it, and they brought in the information. And he told people to basically start franchising it. And Dodgy has said stupid stuff like that before. Like he told the kid who had a career path, an 18-year-old kid who was doing photography, to go and run a salt mine. Like I was in the office when I did, and I knew the kid, and I'm like, that's not good advice. Like, you gotta, as a master, you gotta like make better decisions. Which Chargy said when he nominated him. You have to think before you talk, and just don't say things because people are going to take it seriously because you're the master. They're gonna run around They're gonna run around and quit their jobs, and invest in these do this franchised Brighter Mind scam. And it's a scam, and like that's what people did because he's stupid and he's a liar, right? And then at some point he realized it was a scam. because things started to happen. This girl from the Brighter Minds scam went on a national TV show there that, How to Be a Millionaire. There's a celebrity guy who hosts it, some Bollywood actor, and he gets duped. I mean, he goes along with it. She pretends to read, but you can see she's looking through the blindfold. And this guy, Naranjan Narank, who was already had exposed this as midbrain activation, now he names Dodgy by name, and Heartfulness, Brighter Minds, and Heartfulness by name, and he exposes it, and the TV show has to pull it. And this girl, I don't know what happened to her. She's shamed now. I don't know if she's like, but the Brighter Minds people in Dodgy didn't stand up for her and stand with her. That she's been now called a liar, that she, pretended to read when she didn't. The whole thing. I don't even know what's happened there. Like, it's just putting her in a bad position because he's training kids to lie. You're encouraging them to lie, right? And it's done in such a way. This doctor who Dodgy got all these scientific people to, I've told this before. They got him to do this thing, right? To validate it with scientific research, and everybody else that did it with the blindfolds, and of course kids could read. But this guy did it with the original kid that told Dodgy about it, because he mentioned him by name. We had a conversation about this, right? And he put eye patches on, like the other guy, Naranjan Narang, from the Rationalist Society, from this, this guy who's out to expose this thing. And the kids couldn't do it. But there was a woman who was a pediatrician. She was a doctor. And her kid was doing it. And she believed her kid was actually doing it for reals and wanted her kid to be special, because that's a big deal, the academic pressure for the Indian people, right? There's just so much pressure for the kids. And she attacked this doctor who was exposing the thing and saying, my kid's special. Like, and she got so mad. Like, she was, they were all getting angry. And the way that they do it is they would hand these kids a bag of balls, and there'd be different colors in it. And the kids would have the blindfold on. They'd have to, grab a ball and say what color it was. And eventually, one of the kids would realize they could see through the blindfold and see the color. And that kid would be praised, like, "Oh my God, you're so brilliant, you're great. Yes, you're getting it." And all the other kids then felt bad about themselves because they couldn't do it. So they end up cheating. But the grown-ups never tell them, the instructors never tell them to cheat, to look through the blindfold. They just learn to do it. And the kids end up sort of, forgetting that it's a lie, or just kind of, how kids are. They're not as conscious of lying. And they're just getting praise, and they feel special, and they kind of think it's a trick, but there's like, almost like a magic show. And it's just like, magicians don't reveal their secrets, and they don't maybe even talk with each other that maybe they think the other kids are doing it the right way, but they have to do it their way, right? Whatever, which is looking for the blindfold. And so that's how they learn to game the system, and like nobody ever says anything about it. The adults have plausible deniability. Well, we never told the kids to lie, and these other kids are doing it right. It's just this one kid's a liar, so they can throw the kids on who, if a kid comes out and said, "No, I was looking through the blindfold," it's like, well, you were, but everyone else is doing it the right way. And so it's just so evil. Like, it's just evil. And it's so ridiculous and stupid. Like, it's just unnecessary. It's a bad decision, because even if they were doing it, it has nothing to do with Saj Marg or any of these things. It has nothing to do with spirituality or the heart. It's just, in fact, it's the opposite. It's so carnivalesque, and, it's so, like some kind of magic show. It's so, like a circus act, or one of these carnival acts, or whatever they call it, right? And so it's performative, and they put these glittery vests on the kids, like these purple vests with sparkles, and, to make it more of that kind of, whatever it was, right? It's an illusion. And it looks like they're performing a trick. Like, nobody really is going to believe it. They're like, oh, they must be looking through the blindfolds, or have an earpiece on. It's not like the best illusion either. It isn't like they're in some, like they're doing some kind of David Blaine kind of, big time, David Copperfield illusions. It's kids looking through blindfolds and telling you what's on an Uno card. Like, it's just, it's stupid, right? And the whole thing just demeans the Saj Mark system. And if Dodgy and any of his cronies are listening to this, like, you're fools, and you're an embarrassment, because so many of us can see through it, and so many new people can see through it, and you've demeaned the system. And instead of owning up to it, at some point, he went past the time where he could just own up to it. I got duped, and, I instead of just admitting that he got duped and just letting it go. Oh, this thing isn't real. Like he wanted to save face, and that's the other part. Like at some part, he realized it's an illusion. It's like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm a fool and not a master. And so he doubled down. And this is where his poor decision making comes into play. Because now he gets everyone else involved and he franchises it. I mean, I don't know when he realized it was a scam or if he's just lying to himself the whole time. But either way, he's not a master. Like a master can't do stuff like that. Like a spiritual guru can't encourage kids to lie and take their money and manipulate them and manipulate his followers and these scientific people, doctors and scientists, to put their reputations on the line and lie for him and pretend it's real when it isn't, and then go out to these places and bring these politicians in and go to these universities and talk about it, do demonstrations, and go out there with Tony Nader and this woman, Patricia Scotland from the British Commonwealth, and bring them into it, and just have all these people associated with it. He's doing them all a disservice. It's dishonest. It's dishonorable. He'd do these performances. He got Deepak Chopra to talk about how wonderful it was. And so all these people, whether they realize it or not, and they're endorsing this scam, and maybe just because they think this guy's a legitimate spiritual master, nobody would be this stupid to push this thing. And then they're all like going to be embarrassed by this, as is the mission, as is his former masters, as is the whole organization. And those of us who see through it, we're like, you got to stop doing this, right? But even after he, made the decision to double down on this, then I made videos about it, and he knew about it, and he knew that people knew it was a fraud. And he knew this doctor guy talked to me. We had about 10 long conversations about this, what he went through, and how he was ostracized for telling Dodgy the truth and doing legitimate scientific research. And Dodgy's always claiming he's a scientist. He's not just a spiritual guru, but he's also a scientist, a man of science. But a man of science doesn't push out this thing and get kids to lie and, do this cabaret act or whatever it is called, right? But then he knew there was this opposition. There was people within the Abhyasis were asking about it. Maybe people weren't telling him. Maybe people didn't know that there was this, number of people who knew this was BS. And he had a chance to just back away from it. Like maybe he could keep the programs, but just don't talk about it publicly. Because that was going to piss us off, right? Like when you've been caught and they were watching my videos and they knew this was about that. And you've been caught lying and, lying as a master and just realizing like the lies he has to tell himself to make this okay. And, make this, the people around him, that this would be acceptable and that we should all just go along with it because he's the master. Well, he's not the master. Like masters don't do shit like this, right? And so making it like we should all go along with it. And, we don't trust him, right? When you get caught lying like this and taking advantage of people, not only financially, but getting them to cover up for you. And, all the things, this is like mob-like behavior, even though it's some goofy little thing he's doing. And it's more than just that. He's lying about intercommuning with Babaji. And you're telling these lies and intercommuning with Tuktaji that people can't say, well, they can't. If you say that you're intercommuning, people aren't going to believe you, but people can't disprove it because Babaji intercommuned with higher developed souls, and then there was this Whispers of the Brighter World. And so there's legitimate mediums in the Sajmark system, and he's the master, so if he says it, but he's not trustworthy because he did the Brighter Mind scam, and he's not producing messages because he doesn't have any, and he's canceling Chargy's birthday because he doesn't like Chargy, but he lies about all these things. And he's being deceptive, and, he's somebody who lies all the time. Like, there's just so many things that I see as him being a liar. But instead of just realizing, oh, my God, I've got caught here, people know I've been exposed, he keeps on pushing it. He keeps on talking about the Brighter Mind scam. And that makes him even worse, right? Like he's now just, not only that, but he's a fool, and he keeps on pushing things arrogantly. And there's going to be blowback. There's going to be he's using force, and they're censoring people and they're pushing people backwards, stopping them from talking about something instead of admitting that you're a piece of shit, right? Like you're a piece of shit liar. Like just admit it. Just admit you are. Like you lie all the time to yourself, like not even just to everyone else. And that as a master, you can't do stuff like that. You can't behave like that. You can't, force everyone to go along with your lies just because you're in a position of power. That's abusive. That's, gaslighting, and it's just everything that a master shouldn't do. It's an abuse of your position and authority. And all the people around you that are enabling this, you're destroying the Sajmark tradition and credibility. Because Charji vouched for you. Babaji vouched for you. And so now you make them look horrible. And also, you're supposed to be the culmination of a person who does Sajmark. You're supposed to be the example of what a person can achieve if they do heartfulness. And if you're a lying piece of shit, right, then people are like, well, I'm a lying piece of shit now. Why do I need Sajmark, right? Why do I need heartfulness? And this is why a master has to have impeccable character, because you're going to see flaws. There's always human flaws. Babaji had them, Charji had them, Lalaji had them, Jesus had them, Buddha had them. They all had their human side. And when the person dies, the religion scrubs their humanity from them. And they make them just divine beings, but they weren't. They were people that, that lied at times and did stupid stuff. But you can't do that as a master. You can't be caught, especially stuff like this. I mean, if there's a small lie here or whatever, something, you had a human moment, whatever. But I mean, you can't do stuff like this where you just keep on going with it. You have to have a conscience. You should feel guilt and shame over this thing. If you feel bad about doing it, you brought shame on your masters, right? You brought shame on the divinity. I don't even know if Kamlesh believes in God anymore. Like, I don't know if he's lost. I mean, it seems like they don't even believe in God anymore, right? Never mind Sajmark and the system and the masters, the previous masters. I don't think they believe in any of it. When you do the practice, when I would do the cleaning, and you do the thing at 10 where the 10th maxim, where you beg God for forgiveness for the wrongs you've committed during the day. The 10 maxims of Sajmark, the last one, at bedtime, feeling the presence of God, repent for the wrongs committed, beg forgiveness in a supplicant mood, resolving not to allow repetition of the same. I memorized these things. I went to painstaking, where I just kept on reading them and trying to memorize the wording exactly. And I had it memorized, and Daji came in and changed them. And now I have to go read them, right? But let me read that again. Let me read this again here. It says, at bedtime, feeling the presence of God, so you're laying in bed feeling the presence of God, you repent for the wrongs committed. Beg for forgiveness in a supplicant mood, resolving not to allow repetition of the same. Now, Daji started to give talks about the maxims. Like, this was early on in his heartfulness career, before he just got goofy and tried to pretend to be a guru. He was actually trying to teach the system. And he gave a great talk about Maxim 10. He changed it, which was stupid because the maxims this is channeled stuff by Babaji, that people have to rise up to it. You can't try to bring it down to people's level. But he said something interesting. He said that when you're doing this thing, you're laying in bed and you're thinking about the things that you did that weren't spiritual, the things that weren't a part of a spiritual life, lies that you told, insults that things that you did that were wrong. And you're lying in bed and you're doing this. And I did this really well for a period of time. Like, I was really into it. I just thought it was great. And I always did it naturally as a kid. I remember going to sleep and I would think about things I did that were wrong, like a lie I told. I feel bad about it. Like, even when I was like in my 20s, when I was just a piece of crap punk, like just a punky person with a bad attitude. And I wasn't thinking about God at all. It would bother me. Like, I would yell at my teammates when I played basketball, like when I had adrenaline going. And I would say things, and I was like, why'd you do that? Like, I'd feel embarrassed and ashamed like I did that. Like, I would just think about things I did that were like, and I wasn't trying to be spiritual, a good person, just, things that bothered me. And they would just come up naturally. Like, I wouldn't even be dwelling on them. I wasn't somebody who liked to beat the crap out of myself, but I realized, whenever I lied, I felt like bad about it, even from a young age. Like, it was just hard on me, and just, I went through these things, whatever it was, like when I was in the teenage years, I was working at a convenience store, my friends came in, they wanted something for free, and, I felt bad. Like, I would, I was expected to just, let these kids steal from the store and whatever, and I felt bad about it, right? Like, it just was this thing. It was a whole bunch of stuff. I've talked about this, I think, in the Journey series. But it's there, and it's a good thing, right? Because you're and then you vow to do better. But what Kamlesh said was that when Babaji wrote the maxim, he didn't think of Abhyasi would ever do anything wrong consciously. And so it was begging for forgiveness for things you didn't know you did, and you're vowing to never do them again. I thought that was kind of interesting. And, of course, Babaji learned that that wasn't the case. Guys were doing LSD and did like gatherings and worse, right? And people were involved in like criminal stuff. And I mean, they had like a murder. A preceptor murdered his wife, like in North Carolina. Like I heard this story third hand. And, it had nothing to do with the mission, but it was, something that would make the mission look like a cult, right? And I said before, that's what you don't want. And so they somehow got it so it wasn't a big story, and that they didn't get associated with Saj Marg. But, it's like one of those things, right? But bad things happen, and people do bad things, and Charji was well aware of it. And so I don't know if Kamlesh was doing this wrong, and he was just thinking about things he might have done that he didn't know. He was begging forgiveness for things he did accidentally. But then how are you going to know not to do it again? If you don't know what you did, how can you swear that you'll never do it again? And that was the hard part. Like you'd swear that you'd never do it again, and it was hard to, remember that, 3 years from then or whatever. And so, it's a good maxim and it's a good practice, and it takes some work, right? It helps, you to develop your character and confront yourself. And that's part of the Sajmark system. You're not supposed to dwell on your grossness. You're not supposed to beat the crap out of yourself internally. But when you notice that you've done something wrong, it comes up in your meditation, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done it that way, or that wasn't spiritual. Like you just know things. Like I've experienced it. So many people have. And Kamlesh should have done that with the Brighter Mind scam. Like he should have just realized, hey, this is a scam. What am I doing here? Like I can't do this. But he just keeps on doubling down and tripling down on this thing, and expecting the rest of us to quit or just accept it, or to go along with this lie and even perpetrate it, right? To such an extent, there was a new person that contacted me, and I read this in a video here. This is not part of the Journey series, but a video on this other channel here. And the person said that they went to get their first sitting, and the preceptor is talking about being able to see through a blind, being able to, close your eyes and see things and see colors and stuff. And that's how this preceptor decided to impress this person, right? And so, the person's like, then found my channel because they're looking for, they think this is a scam and a cult, and they find my channel now. And this has all happened because these stupid people copyrighted me, so I made a channel based in this, a new channel. Like they screw up all the time. They like keep on making it worse. And this person said, then this person, I realized that I'd told their story and said, I was asking if it was a cult when I went. So first they said this. I was asking if it was a cult before I went, and I thought so. Thanks, I'll check it out. They also mentioned drinking staturine without harm and cleaning the environment using purely your mind, raising the vibration of the planet, but couldn't give a definition of vibration, etc. What a load of boop, gullible fools. That's actually happens in the cleaning process, but this preceptor really probably didn't understand how to explain it, right? That when you do the cleaning, you are cleaning the atmosphere. And when you raise your own personal vibration, everything is based in vibration, right? Like, my voice is a vibration, but then there's higher vibrations. And when you listen to certain music, it'll bring you to a spiritual state, right? And when you listen to nature, and there's just, there's higher vibrations, right? Low vibrations, higher vibrations. And so the Sajmarg resonates on a higher vibration. The forceless force, the transmission that's given, is of a refined nature. And so, so it's, you vibrate on a higher level. But then this person wrote, YouTube's deleted my comments, but they also mentioned a lot of crazy things, including drinking strychnine, which I guess is strychnine, and cleaning the environment through meditation. Thanks, I'll check out the original teachings, because I, commented on that. And then the person wrote this. Got to make this bigger here so I can read it. It said, thanks, mate. Thanks for the shout out, too. I'm the one who went to the first class and left a comment. What perfect timing, huh? Maybe God does have a plan. The New Age spiritual narcissism is nothing. This narcissism is something else. They told me about the vegetarian dogs, too. I don't even know what that is. Drinking strychnine, again, cleaning ecosystem and atmosphere through meditation. Doesn't sound like any meditation I know, or even the goal of meditation. The teacher even tried to gaslight me, accused me of having a meditation addiction. Yeah, I'm addicted to letting go and posture and breathing nutty. So this was this person's first interaction with a preceptor, and Daji has failed dramatically. Again, this is, this person shows up and they say this thing, I have no way to verify their story, but, I know that this is the case because I've heard other things like this. Daji is not training good preceptors, and there's been such a fall off from him. But when somebody's coming to you new, you just want them to experience a transmission. You're not telling them, telling them about the Brighter Mind scam is a huge problem because now you've been duped because Daji's a liar and now he's turning you into a liar. Not knowing how to explain that when you do the transmission and cleaning, I understood it from doing it. I understood how I went to a higher place when I was meditating with this transmission and cleaning. And I understood how I affected the atmosphere later on when I went to work at a treatment center with, these sex offenders. And it's a gross place. It's like a prison-like environment. And how me doing the Sajmark system elevated the atmosphere. There were times these kids would end up in the timeout room. They need to be restrained. And oftentimes I would do the 9 o'clock prayer. Like the kid would be settling, but oftentimes the kid would be walking around punching the walls, venting about how bad their lives suck. It was like a room with like just carpet on the walls, right? And they'd be put in the timeout room. And I would just sit there and I wouldn't say anything. And if the 9 o'clock prayer was happening, if it's 9 p.m., I'd do the 9 o'clock prayer and keep my eyes open, but I'd do the prayer. And the kid would just settle and sit there. And sometimes I would see the kid's aura. I could see the difference. It raised people's vibration by me practicing the system, by doing the meditation. It raised the consciousness and took it to another level. The same way I was being pulled up by Charji and the preceptors and things. I was able to do that, with other people in the environment. And I had a positive effect. This is back in 1993. So I start Sajmark, and I start my work in the human service field. I eventually get my master's in counseling and things like this. And I'm working in this treatment center, and I'm applying the Sajmark techniques as I'm reading about them in the books to the atmosphere, the environment. And my coworkers end up seeing this, and I talk about it. And two of them started. They didn't stay with it. They were like younger girls. They were like girls in their fresh out of college. But they ended up trying it with my preceptor. And all of them had a high opinion of the system because they knew I did it, and they saw that I was positively affecting the environment, the atmosphere, through this philosophy and this practice, right? And I saw it even more than they did because I saw the difference of how I was before. A very, I was a person that was drastically underfunctioning. And I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't deal with stress. Couldn't get through college. All these things. And this system helped me do that. I ended up graduating on my third try at college. I just lost interest and, I just couldn't complete things, right? And then I worked at this highly stressful environment, and I was very, functional in this environment. I was working in this prison-like environment that had, the average time that somebody works there is 9 months. And people would start there, work a week, and quit because it's just, these kids are horrible. And the place itself is dysfunctional. And there's hard environments to work. And anybody who works in these treatment centers, some of you guys have, or know people have, and they're just horrible places to work. And I worked there like over 2 years. And then later on worked in another place that was even worse when I got my master's in counseling. And, and I was able to do a better job and improve my performance based in Sajmark and also, uplift the place itself. But that's how Sajmark works. But I wouldn't tell somebody that when they first come in, right? Like it's stupid. Like you would have them experience a transmission and then the person realizes how it's affecting them. And that's the first thing. They start seeing benefit in themselves. And then they go to a gathering and they feel benefit even on a higher level. And then you let them know when you go into your job or you go with your family. In fact, you don't even have to let them know because they start experiencing it. They can see that now they positively affect the people around them. Like they're being uplifted to a higher level, and then they affect the people around them, right? But this dopey preceptor in the story is telling this person on the first day. And the person's like concerned it might be a cult. And the person, what you say is you can quit anytime. You don't have to pay any money. You have to quit anytime. You can quit anytime. You don't say, hey, guess what? It's not a cult. By the way, you can read with a blindfold on. Like that's just only what morons do. But that's a kind of level of, debauchery Dodgy's brought into this system, right? So this is like being a liar and just admitting, these guys who are censoring me because I'm exposing their lies, right? That's what I've learned to do as a YouTuber, and I've gotten good at it. And, it was a mistake for them, to, do that, to handle it that way. From the very beginning when I started talking about this, because I have some sense of responsibility that I know things that people need to know. And they're just lying on the internet all the time, and they're committing frauds. When you tell preceptors to buy books, and then you tell everyone you're a best-selling author, and you're sold that, when they're announcing this guy's a best-selling author, and they call his book a magnum opus, right? That's a lie, right? You're not selling those books. You're not a best-selling author. You've gamed the system. When you buy views, when you use bots to buy views and to buy subscribers, fake subscribers, bots, that's a lie. You're not performing. And then that you suck. You know that you can't sell books on your own because your books suck. And even if they were good, they wouldn't be best-selling books. I said, Reality at Dawn wouldn't be a best-selling book. My Master wouldn't be a best-selling book. The books by the previous masters, they wouldn't be best-selling books because they're not those kind of books. And people aren't those kind of people. It's because people are lower level. And so, you take the amount of views you get, and you take the amount of sales you get, and you're honest about it, right? But then, come out and get this award that, I guess you pay for, this Budam Pasham award, which is stupid. And then, tell everyone, look how great Dodgy is. No, he sucks. He's a liar and he sucks, right? He just gets caught lying. When I first heard about The Heartfulness Way, his first book, and it said Kamlesh Patel in big letters was the author, and Josh Pollock was also the co-author. And what it was Joshua Pollock, who I talked to a number of times, and he had good things to say about Dodgy as a preceptor. And Josh worked for Kamlesh at a pharmacy, and he had nothing but good stories about him. And so, I thought, I believe those were true at the time. And, they had a relationship. And Josh went to Kamlesh, I think he was his first preceptor, his main preceptor. And he started asking Kamlesh questions, or Kamlesh would explain the Sajmark system. And Josh took notes. And years later, when Kamlesh became the master, he published this book. It was written by Josh Pollock, right? Chargy did the same thing with this guy, Clark Powell, who's an American. Both Josh Pollock and Clark Powell are both Americans. And Clark Powell was an ex-Vietnam guy who had some issues, crazy stuff. But he was, I've talked about this guy before, but not, by name. But he was a more outgoing kind of fun person. Ex-Vietnam. He had been in Vietnam, and he was just, he was different than the other people. He was loud, and, he had his issues, but he was kind of fun to be around. And he had lots of stories, and he would be able to just go see Chargy. Went to a gathering. Chargy was, had to be protected from people because they would all want to be with him all the time. Because the energy that he had and sitting with him felt great, like the energy that he exuded. And he just brought you to a different level. And people wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. But there's certain people who could just walk in anytime they want to the master's cottage in India, or he could just come and stay with them, right? There's people who had a green light to come in whenever they chose to come in. Unless, Chargy said no one can come in. But other than that, these people could just come in. And Clark was one of those people, and Clark would ask him questions, and he would tape record and he would video record the answers. And he has all this, all this footage and stuff that's probably going to be lost. I don't know if Clark even quit. Maybe, I'm not even sure. He got obsessed with Donald Trump. And I just unfriended him on Facebook, but he whatever. But he wrote a book called The Sajmar Companion where he would ask Chargy a question and Chargy would answer. And it was a question and answer book, and it's a better book than Heartfulness Way. Chargy was a master at the time, and so it's a book that should have been pushed out more than Kamlish's Heartfulness Way. But of course, Heartfulness was a new thing Kamlish was doing, and he needed to be a writer. But he wasn't a writer. Like Josh Powell wrote the book, right? And there are literary rules. Just like when you get caught telling a story in your book, and then it comes out that you've told a different story in public, you lose credibility. Like, which is it? A significantly different story. And so when you go and publish a book and claim you're an author when you aren't, and it seems like all of his, I think, Designing Destiny might be talks that they've transcribed. And this, and the doctor who did who exposed Dodgy as a fraud, we were having a conversation. He said he read he was reading the book, the Wisdom Bridge, which was really stupid. I read parts of it, and it was like written by a child. It was like ridiculous and stupid. And he felt like that wasn't even written by Kamlish. The Dodgy Truther says Kamlish can't write his own books. His recent book, Spiritual Anatomy, there's a guy who came out, and I covered this in one of my videos. There's a guy who came out and gave a talk in which he said he was a part of an editing team, a big, large editing team of copywriters and, all these people who Dodgy gave all of his notes and things he'd scribbled in his diaries, and he said, put them together into a book. And then they'd be reading it to Dodgy and almost appear asleep while they were reading it. And so they had rewritten his thing. They were ghostwriting this book. I mean, it's more than just ghostwriting, a team of people. So like calling this his magnum opus and then finding out he tells stories differently, like he can't recall his own lies anymore. And so all these things matter, right? Like this is the kind of person you'll be defined as. And when you die, we have the information. I have it on video. Other people have all this documentation. Going to Tuksuji and saying Tuksuji merged in you, and then saying Chargy wasn't part of the divine hierarchy, that pisses people off. And when they've already, people who love Chargy and know that he was so much better than you, Dodgy, Kamlish. And so, this is your legacy. You're going to be known as a liar. Like, this has been your definition. Like, you can't be trusted in the decisions you've made and organizationally to where, these preceptors and other people are following in your lead and telling lies to new people, like brand new people. Just give them there's a point where Kamlish said, he made these videos and he said, have people try the meditation with transmission and without. And that was kind of brilliant. That was a good thing on his part. But he's fallen so much and he's gotten into this, he's trying to be this cult of personality where he's trying to be a fake guru and master when he's got bad character qualities. He lies to people, believes his own lies, and then, he does all these things to cover it up just to save face or whatever it is. And these scams that he's involved in, I don't even know, the real estate scam that people are saying, where they claim that he's defrauding them of money, all these things, right? These are how you're defined as a person. And your legacy is going to be that. Like the way that people have allowed you to trash Chargy, well, just wait till you're gone. Like, like all the people around him, too. I mean, there's going to be like a frickin' witch hunt, right? People are pissed off. Like you've wrecked their thing, And some people are going to be held accountable. All the people around Dodgy who's going along with this. There's a time where you have to stand up and like frickin', tell the truth, right? They should come out and just tell the truth. And social media, especially these people who inside who have, they see what's going on. I mean, I talked to one guy who was, every day he was stressed out. And he finally just decided, I'm just going to go along with it and just, this is a senior person, somebody who I have respect for, but he was, he was at his wit's end seeing the degradation that was happening to the system that Chargy had kept so pure in Babaji. Chargy was, above reproach because he just was such an honorable, like brilliant man. He didn't have to dive down into this low level of seedy behavior, right? And so, it's like the presidency, the way Trump has treated the presidency, which I found great because the presidency is a lie and it's just an act and it's performative. But Trump didn't act like presidential and it pissed everybody off. And because he wasn't, pretending to play the game. But in truth, they're all scumbags, right? But that's not the case with the Sajmarg masters. And Dodgy's not acting like a master because he's not one. But he expects everyone to pretend that he is, and it's just, it's goofy. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this one up here. But, it's there. All right, so I'm going to wrap this one up here. I just thought I'd add this to the end of the video. Going back to this thing with Maxim 10, like when you come into the Sajmark system, you start meditating, you become aware, because when you meditate, you understand what your thoughts are. Like people have thoughts, whatever it is, bad thoughts, evil thoughts, good thoughts, whatever they are. But you have thoughts that you don't hold yourself accountable for, right? You wish bad things on other people, these types of things, right? You have these thoughts. You feel hatred towards people, anger, and you just, you go with it, right? There's nothing in your system, the American system, the whatever system that you're from, lying and cheating, like what happens in India. There's a lot of lying and cheating. People are, politicians, a lot of bribery, a lot of corruption. And it's just, okay, this is what we do in our culture, right? This is, the brighter mind scam, these things. You just do things because everyone else does them, right? You go along with, like my friends wanted me to give them free food because I worked at a convenience store and I could, they were just wanted to steal and let me steal because we were friends and, I was supposed to let them, right? All these things. And it's just a part of the culture. Everybody does it, these kind of things, right? And that you just allow yourself to do things that your heart and your soul doesn't want you to do. And when you're younger, it's harder because you look at adults, and we all have these experiences where we realize our parents are kind of scumbags. Like people have these experiences where they thought their parents were great, idolized their parents, and then the parents lied to them, or I caught my parents lying when I was, in I don't know, 8th grade or whatever, it's 12, 13, 14 years old. It was before I was 14. And so 12, 13 years old, I caught my parents lying. And they confronted them with the lies, and then they just doubled down on the lie, and I lost all respect for them, right? Years ago, I started doing a landscaping business. My brother was helping me because he had done this landscaping before. And so I started doing it. And there was a woman that lived maybe a couple of blocks away from him. I ended up cutting her lawn. And she was sort of a youngish single woman, older than me, but younger than my brother. And she said she knew my brother and my brother's friend. And my brother had sex with this woman and cheated on his wife with this woman. My brother was a serial cheater. He had, cheated on his wife with hundreds of women, sex addict or something. And I didn't know that because I had a higher opinion of him, right? I didn't, And so I said to him, hey, I'm cutting this woman's lawn. She knows you. He's like, I don't know who she is. And he just bit my head off. Like he got aggressive and angry, right? And I'm like, well, that was a weird reaction, And later on, I found out, he told me he left his wife and he left his wife for another woman, all these things. And they had been like a second family to me. And, I was kind of like shocked about it, but I kind of should have known based in just the way he was being. But I just didn't, like at that point, I didn't know cheaters. Like I didn't know anybody who cheated. I didn't know anybody. My dad, whatever. He wasn't a cheater. He had kind of failed and tried, but I didn't know about it. But I didn't think people cheated like that, like something you see on TV and movies. But then I was in college and I had roommates and friends who were cheating on their girlfriends, and then they expected me to lie about it, and I didn't feel comfortable lying, all these things, right? Like I just don't like to lie. And the girls would know I didn't like to lie, so they'd ask me about it. And it became this thing, and I'm like, well, just fucking, he's a scum. If you're asking me, then you already know he's lying to you because you know that I won't, that I have trouble lying, right? And there's this whole bro code and you're supposed to go along with it. But there's all these things, right, where there's just levels of poor behavior that your soul doesn't want you to do. And you have some sense of guilt and shame about it. And, then you find out your religion is full of, pedophile priests and that there's no real people out there who are living the way that the religion tells you that you should live. And people just embrace the darkness, right? They just embrace the darkness. And when you come to Sajmark, you start meditating and you start thinking about those things that you did. And there's such an emphasis on character building. You notice how Daji doesn't talk about character formation or character building. Charji talks about it all the time. It was part of all of his talks. It was just always there that people have to work on your character because he knew that all of us had to. Like, and he was talking about to these Gujarati people about their obsession with making money, for example. Like Charji would go to a place and he would talk about, like, came to America, you talk about the two sides of the coin. You only can have pleasure because we're pleasure seekers, in America more than other places. And you said if you're going to have pleasure, you're going to have pain. You always said it. It was a constant theme of his talks, right? And when you meditate, it just comes up. Like all of a sudden, things that you did or was just part of your family or just part of your culture, and you start questioning those things. It should happen naturally doing the Sajmark system. There should be some natural sense of guilt or like shame or, those aren't good feelings, but just that feeling of, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, right? And some desire to change. And that's what the 10th maxim is for at the end of the night. And sometimes when you go to bed, you think about the days you're supposed to do a cleaning, but once in a while when you're doing your cleaning or whatever, there's things there and you're thinking about like, oh, I maybe shouldn't have done this way. Maybe I should have done this. And that was whatever it might be, right? And we have to reconcile and deal with those things. You don't have to deal with it here on the YouTube channel because in the internet. In the internet, I need an edge. Like I need to be able to, since defend myself or whatever. And so, I mock people and I do these things. I'm covering evil all the time and I'm covering lies and all these things. And, when you work in an environment like that, you have to develop whatever it is. And people say, well, you're mocking people. That isn't spiritual. Yeah, it isn't. I'm not claiming it is. I'm not claiming mocking is a good behavior, right? And I'm not saying that as like I'm some spiritual person. I get to mock people. This is what I got to do to cope, whatever it is. But I understand, I'd worked on those types of issues, things I knew I had to change before that weren't, spiritual. But now I've needed those things, right? So there's a reason why I have them because the internet's, bare knuckle brawling out here. It's not freaking, whatever. And so I'm also disrespectful. And, I call names and things. And people are put off by that. I'm sure Abiasis when I mock Dodgy or I call him names or whatever. But, sometimes this is what needs to be done. Like this is just, I'm not, like, again, making excuses. I understand that this is not higher level vibrational, higher vibrational behavior. Again, not an excuse. That's just how I've come across that. But I'm aware of it. Like I'm aware that these are, I'm not like lying to myself that mocking is, I have the right to mock people and be spiritual and it's, some higher behavior. It's not, right? But you have to, be honest about these things, what I'm talking about. And the Maxim 10 helps you. And again, it helps you confront these things in yourself and then, not do them. And when you're looking at character development, and Charji said the character development is 100% on the Abhyasi. And he was talking about these guys, his inner circle. He talked about their characters and how they had the worst characters, the worst character qualities. And Kamlesh was one of these people. He was one of the people. He said every one of them, every single one of them, to the person, he said, has these issues. They're arrogant. They're abusive. They're just. He went down the list of the things that they do, and also they're into these financial institutions. And they want their big egos. I mean, a lot of these people they had past lives as Asuric kings. They had bad past lives that that's evident in their present life, and these are the people now running the Heartfulness debacle, including Dodgy, right? But when you're doing this and you're aspiring to be better and you're working on your character, you have to be able to look up at the master and say, he's higher than I am, right? Like he's better. Because if the system is making you into a better person, he's the example of the system. And that's the way it has to be. And so that person has to be, on a different level. And they might have their human moments. And you might judge them for their human moments, but then you realize, well, they do have human, they're still human beings and they're going to have their low moments. But overall, they have to be much better and higher than you are. And Dodgy just isn't that, right? Like on so many levels, like I don't want to say look down on Dodgy, but, he's lower, right? He does things that I can't imagine ever doing myself. And it's not just one little thing. It's not like he has one flaw, right? There was these, in the Mahabharata, there was the Pandavas and the Pandavas. I don't know, Pandavas, I think. And they were 5 brothers. And one of them, Arjuna, was like, a great archer. And he was the one that was, he was like one of the best archers in the world. And he was the one that was going to have to win the war for them with his archery skill. And then there was Bhima, his brother, who was like the strongest man in the world. And then all of them had different qualities. But their eldest brother, Yudhishthira, was his, his mom intercommuned with these higher developed souls. She learned how to get pregnated by etheric beings. She would call the beings to her and they would impregnate her. And his father was Dharma, or duty. And Yudhishthira was a great leader. He was really honest. I mean, he was honest and wise, and just, he had all these leadership skills, and he was the head of the family, right? And he just had all these wonderful character qualities, a person of impeccable character. But he had a gambling addiction. Like, he gambled away his whole frickin' family twice. you know? Like, he had a chance to walk away, and he did it again. And he gambled to his evil cousin and his uncle, who was able to manipulate. He played this dice game. His uncle was able to use his mind to manipulate the outcome of the dice because, they had real powers back then. And even with a rigged game, he went in and gambled his four brothers, his mom, and his Arjuna's wife to these evil people that had bad intentions for them, right? And they were their slaves. And like he had this one thing. And so, with a master or somebody like you, they might have these little, whatever, leftover character issues. I mean, it's just, that's part of being a human being. But Daji is a mess, right? Like, he's an absolute mess. And I can't respect him or look up to him. I mean, the lying is just atrocious, but also the desire for egotistical desires to be somebody famous and to lie and cheat and, game the system to try to impress people that you're something that you're not, and then throwing Chargy under the bus, and, all the things that he's done, all the scams he's involved with, all the bad decisions. It's not like one little thing, it's everything, right? And lying being the central part. He's just a liar. He lies to himself. He expects other people to go along with the lies, and they do things to intimidate and, to force people to social manipulation to get you to go along with them. And like, you're having an outcome where you have these preceptors now who are just a mess themselves because, like, you have this guy who isn't doing quality work as a master, and he's a bad example. And so there's a degradation in the system. And that's, like, it's just falling apart because you can't look up to this guy. You can't look at this guy and go, this is the outcome of the system, and feel good about it. If this is the kind of person that Sahaj Marg, Heartfulness produces, and he's the master of the system, then this system sucks. Like, he's the ultimate end product, and he's supposed to be a glowing example of what you can be. And who wants to be like this guy, right? Only scumbags. Like, I don't want to be like him, right? I don't look up to him and aspire to be like him, right? If I didn't know Chargy, I'm like, well, this system sucks. For people who never met Chargy, they're like, how could this be a good system? Because the guy who's supposed to be the top of the line is a piece of crap liar, right? And so, that's the outcome of his actions. He's delegitimized the Sahaj Marg system because he's such a failure and such a bad example of what it can do. And he had all the work done. Like, I saw he had the work done. And, like, this is what you've become. Like, this is the kind of person you are after all the spiritual work and all the elevation you got, the charge you did. And, I saw the work the charge you did on him. And so for me, it's even harder because I know he was a legitimate master and he was given all these powers and given all these, abilities. And he went through the same things that the other masters did. I mean, I guess, I can't say for every little thing, but, Chargy documented the spiritual journey that Babaji took him through. And then when you met him, you understood, well, what that meant as an end product, as a person who's graduated the Sahaj Marg system. I mean, you're always evolving, you're always maturing, you're always working on your character. That never stops, even as the master. But you can't, and that's the other thing, you can't think that you made it. Like Chargy said, he never looked at himself as the master, and Daji certainly has done that. And the people around him are pushing that, right? But, you're never done. You're always on your spiritual journey. And if you forget about that, then you're going to, I've made it. Well, no, then you're screwed. And that's what's happened here as well. And so, like I say, he's delegitimized the whole system by failure. And you're like, well, if he had all that work and he got access to all this levels of higher development and he's fallen in such a way, then it's dispiriting, right? Like, well, what's going to happen to the rest of us, right? Like, I would assume, based on my knowledge of Kamlesh, he was a better Abhyasi, more into it, more dedicated, just around Chargy, more involved. a lot of these people, that's how I would think of them. I don't know them personally, but I saw that he was moving along spiritually in 1997, 6 or 7, whatever it was. I think 1997. We had that interaction with him at the airport and then other interactions with him. And then hearing stories about him, he was a good preceptor, really devoted and really into it. He was really into this system. He was, I read all the books, but this guy was, people who were even more, like a Sajmarg nerd, like someone who just obsessed with the system. And I would say that he was one of those people, at least on the surface. I don't know, what kind of a scumbag he was that he was hiding, but at least he was somewhat of a good Abhyasi. Like, at least, I know that to be true. And then he was given this extra level of work and to become the master and to fall this low, to be this low of a person, to be this, just the lies, just everything's, he's just a big lie. Everything that he does, his mastery is characterized by deception, all the things he's done. And then forcing everyone to be like, well, he can't lie. He's a master and he's just above you. You don't understand the ways of the master. Pulling the master card every chance they get to try to gaslight and silence people. And then, do things like censorship when he gets caught lying, like they try to do with me. Like that just sucks. Like, you suck, right? And, and when somebody sucks this bad and you can't look up to them, then it's like, well, what am I even doing this system? I mean, people are going to lose faith. And then they question, all right, was Babaji and Charji real, or was that just performative? Like, those are the natural ways you go. This is the damage that he's done, right? This is what people are going through. And so, it's a bad time. I have my explanation of it. I mean, like, I guess everybody can fall, and he's an example of that, because lots of people have fallen before. This was the first example of one of the masters falling, and he's done it. Like, he's cut himself off. He's thinking he's better than them, and he's trying to be a founder. He's running, with his ego out in front of him, and he's lost his way. And because of that, it's worse because, the higher you get, the worse the fall is. Because you've created this vacuum. The masters of the system, and Babaji said this to Charji. There's a time where, Charji was just hating somebody at work. And he was already well on his way to being Babaji's successor. He said, I just look at the guy and hate him. And Babaji said, you got to throw this out of your system. Because when you're a spiritual master like this, your system is so pure and clean, and there's just this vacuum that's connected to God. And if a particle, like a particle of, depraved particle, like a dishonest, a character flaw particle, just something small. And this happened with Charji's father, who got into stamp collection. Seems like an innocent thing, but just something that's, not pure, that's not part of the divine system, gets into your system, it can contaminate your whole system because it's so pure. And so you have to be extra disciplined. So he said, throw the hate out of your heart and don't let it back in. Don't allow hate to be in your heart, because at your level, it'll contaminate your whole system in a short period of time. Jealousy, envy, any of these things, right? Just a mere thought. You have to be completely disciplined. You get these negative thoughts, and your whole system, which is pure, will be contaminated almost instantaneously, which sucks. But that's the level of discipline the masters of the system have. And when you get to these higher levels, you have to be more and more disciplined. I mean, it's been part of the teachings. And whatever, thoughts that Daji had, quite a bit of them, there was impurities in him. And now they have, the power that he was given to be the master has made those impurities be more than they were beforehand. Like, he's worse now than when he was an Abhyasi. When Charji was alive, Charji could clean it. So it wasn't like there was some and even now that he could get help if he was willing to get help. But he's disconnected himself from the masters. He disconnected himself from Charji. He's trying to be his own man, his own, he's competing with them. And so he's cut off, so he doesn't have anybody to clean out to help him, pull him out of this, this depravity and the lies and the deception. And, it's an example of that, right? And so, like, for me, I'm not looking down the Sajmark system because this is human error. And when you disconnect yourself, which has happened to the other people who fell, when people disconnect themselves from the idea of the master and they think of themselves as something more than that, then they plummet like a stone. Because you always have to be looking up. You always have to have something or somebody to aspire to be like. And that person has to be moving ahead of you. Babaji said, I'm in the central region, swimming behind Lology, and Lology is transmitting his new discoveries to me as that happens. Like in his etheric world, Lology is swimming in the so-called central region, the divine ocean of bliss, and he's finding new discoveries and transmitting them back to Babaji, who's using them as Babaji's the guy running the universe now, but he still has his master and God that he looks up to, aspires to be like, right? Chargie's saying he never thought of himself as the master because you have to have something above you. Like you just have to have something to reach for, something to aspire to be like. You have to have that kind of level of, it has to be like that, right? Because once you think you've made it, then there's nowhere to go but down, right? Once you think you've reached the level, oh yeah, I'm done, I got it, then you're just going to fall because that's all you have. And that's what's happened to Dodgy. And so he's not like a reflection of the efficacy of the Sashmark system. It's a reflection of Dodgy's own personal failure and the lies and all the things that people are doing to enable him. He's fucking pulling everyone down with him, right? Which is, I mean, it's a horrible thing that's happened here. Anyways, let me wrap this thing up here. Okay, back to real time here. It's Sunday, March 3rd, 9 o'clock in the morning. I want to finish this video up. I have one more thing to say about Dodgy, which I want to cover in a separate little segment on my other channel. And that is that, when he got that report that he commissioned from the doctor that contacted me, and the report basically said this is a scam and these kids can't see if you put an eye patch over their eyes. He had that report. They all did, right? People around him, Dodgy. Dodgy's supposed to be a man of science, a pharmacist. And when you have a report like that, you can't bury it and then go out and pretend that report doesn't exist, right? And I said that sort of in another video, but I just want to say those words in a separate, thing, whatever. That, you can't do that. Like, you just can't do that. Like, that's, not only in terms of liability, but also just, it's wrong on a spiritual level. It's fundamentally dishonest. That there was a report that not one kid, everybody tested, not one kid could do the tricks when he put the eye patches on, which has happened with the other guy. Like this happened to the midbrain activation scam, right? Only a person with no moral compass would do this. Only a person who would have, no moral compass would, no sense of integrity or ethics would perpetrate this fraud after he got a report like that. And you can speculate to why. I think I know why. I think he just doesn't want to lose face because a master doesn't get duped like he got duped. Like he fell for this thing. I think he really believed in it. And then he got this report and, I think he's warped reality. I think he has mental issues. And he gets all these people to go along with him because he's the master. But he just can't deal with the fact that he got duped this way. Like he kind of, on one level, he knows he's like sucks and he's a fool. And like a master doesn't make decisions like this, right? If you are looking into something, you found somebody else's, like it has nothing to do with him. It's not inspired by him. And he had some interaction with Babaji and Babaji downloaded this, he had some, Shruti or something. And he came with this idea of how to do the Brighter Mind scam. It was a pre-existing midbrain activation scam. Another thing is that the kid who showed Dodgy this originally did the midbrain activation scam from other, whatever it was, source, one of these other, fraudulent spiritual organizations. And they used to call it midbrain activation, Dodgy, when he first got it. But then they realized that name had been compromised. That name had been, that whole scam had been proven to be a scam. And if you search midbrain activation scam, you find all this material. So they changed it to neuroplasticity, which is just some, it's a term that has nothing to do with what's happening here. Which, they just, it's some like mumbo jumbo they throw in there to make it sound scientific. But it's just like these kids doing these finger exercises to balance the hemispheres. It doesn't it might balance the hemispheres, but it doesn't produce the ability to see colors with your touch and your smell. Like that just doesn't happen. We're rewiring the brain so you can do that. No, and why would you do that? And you're not doing it with the blind and all these things. It's a proven scam. But the fact that he changed the name from midbrain activation, but they know it's the same thing. Like you go to midbrain activation, it's the exact same scam. And so that's how Dodgy received it. But then, like, he was embarrassed, right? Because this is embarrassing. Like, only a fool would fall for this. And he's, like, franchising the thing. And he commissions these scientific people and doctors, and one of them doesn't, get the memo, and he does real research. He wants to do it, like, authentically. And he puts eye patches on the kids, and the kids can't do it, especially the kid who showed Dodgy originally, who's now in his 20s, and he did a recent performance in his 20s, and they're still doing this stuff. It's an absolute scam. And the guy, when he talked to me, the doctor, he said that specifically doing it with the original kid, who I'd already knew the story about that kid, who my family knew, who was, a kid that was someone who had a very loose relationship with the truth, in terms of his exaggerating his stories. He's a BSer. But Dodgy getting duped by it. And then the other crime, of course, is once I made videos about it and there was outcries and people were being intimidated. They said they'd being threatened. Abiasis who asked questions about it. Like that's how bad, that's how thuggery, that's how cult-like, and that's how much of a cult this is, and all this thuggery behavior. And when that happened, all these people, were forced into silence, and they were upset about it, and they're still very upset about it. And then I made it public on my YouTube channel, and I have a bigger audience and things, and a platform. And I sent a personal voiceover to Dodgy and said, you just can't do this, right? And the guy, instead of realizing, okay, because a good grifter knows when it's time to get out, like a good Ponzi scheme, a good pyramid scheme, there's a time where you got to just cut and run. You made your money and you got to get out. The cops are starting to get there, and the jig is up, right? You got to stop being you got to stop the scam, right? You got to stop the grift. And a good grifter knows that. Good scammer knows that. Good criminal. But Dodgy keeps on pushing it and getting all these other people involved. And this one guy speculated to me, this guy I called the Dodgy Truther, some guy who's, he's been knowing about this for a while. He's trying to get the information out as well. And he said that he's bringing all these politicians in, so they're all got their fingerprints on it. So if things go down, they all will be embarrassed by, Deepak Chopra and then all these people from higher levels of government. Every time Dodgy has somebody significant, he had this prince. The guy was like a legitimate prince. He was part of a royal line and, Indian, prince. And he brought the Brighter Minds kids out. Every doctor, he gets these people out. So he wants to, legitimize something that he knows is a scam, right? And, if he was an honest and ethical person, he would publish the report he got from this doctor and say, yeah, this is the other side of this. Because it's not, if the kids are looking through the blindfold, which they are, then he's teaching these kids to lie. And that's the opposite of building confidence. It's teaching them something. I mean, a master shouldn't be teaching kids how to lie. And so he shouldn't be making the people around him lie for him and cover up for his own embarrassment and failure. That's what a cult leader does, right? This is what makes it a cult. And so, this is, fundamentally wrong on every level. It just makes him into a bad person. Like, this is what a bad person does. This is what a person with no moral integrity, no moral compass, right? And just and getting everyone to go along with it. That's like the other thing. Like people, you're supposed to be leading them and showing them good character qualities. And there's such a fall off. I mean, it's just bad. And just a lack of wisdom, because you're going to get exposed. Like you do something like this, and the stress you live under waiting for this to, all these scams that they're doing. And like the real estate scam that I'm hearing about, if you're going to defraud people and you're doing it under the guise of being a trustworthy, because he has trust capital built up in the fact that Babaji, Lalaji, and Charji, all of them built a level of trust, organizational trust, in this organization, and they're trusting Chargie's judgment to make him master, because Chargie was so good at everything. So these people who are all Chargie people, most Abiasis are Chargie people, and they're like, all right, Chargie was great, and he's, Chargie was such a success at everything, and he endorsed this guy, and he's got the backing of Babaji and Whispers and all these things, that he must be the master. That's the way I felt. And so there's built-in trust for him. So he has built-in trust from this position, just in terms of the cultural trust of a guru in India. A guru wouldn't do these things. And so, I mean, there's just a level of trust you have that he has been given. And he's betrayed that trust over and over again. He makes these bad decisions, and then, all these things. The other thing is them, doing this stuff where they copyrighted my videos. If Daji had this couple of talks where he said that you're going to be staked up to Antarctica, and your soul is going to be erased completely if you go against the divine hierarchy. It's another way of threats and bribes. This is going back to what Babaji wrote about in the religion chapter in Reality at Dawn, that religions use threats and bribes to control their people. And that's what Daji's doing here. But if you really had the power to do that, you wouldn't have to copyright my videos. You wouldn't have to try to silence me. Just be a good person. I did accept him as the master of the system. I endorsed him, and I said things, personally to him and publicly. If you watch my earlier videos, and people were saying they didn't like the guy. My own son said early on he really didn't like the guy. And, my wife and people in the, commented I defended the guy. And, I explained when he made bad decisions about COVID, he wasn't a truther. What we evaluate is what we knew as COVID, what we knew about COVID, Corona, right, COVID, early on, all of us in the truth community, Daji was just acting like a fool and making bad decisions, and I had to explain he wasn't a truther. And, but you can't not be a truther and be a master. You have to be someone who has a relationship with the truth. But because of my experience, I overlooked, in my trust in Chargy and these things, I overlooked. And I had good experiences with Kamlesh, too. So I had to, accept this. It took some pain and, what this meant to the system, the mission, and the future of Saj Marg and, myself and all the things. It's painful, right? But it's the truth. It's, it's the painful truth. And, we've all had to deal with it. But, this brighter mind scam, the midbrain activation scam, and Daji is suppressing information that he commissioned. Like, he asked this guy to do this report, and it didn't go his way, and he's buried the report. And he should say this report exists, that this is, there's some evidence that doesn't work. But they already know it, right? And if he did that, he would look like such a fool. He doesn't come back from that. His mastery's over. People will not accept him as a master because a master doesn't fall for these things. And he should just let that happen. Like, he's a disgrace. His legacy is he's going to be disgraced in some way. That's his legacy, right? Because all of us who are, we're very upset by this, right? All of us who are in the mission and see this, it's not going away after he passes away. Like, his legacy is going to be this. The organization's going to have to deal with this. The same way that they've been able to erase Chargy and pretend Chargy wasn't who he was and rewrite Chargy's, all of us who know Chargy, but the way he's treated Chargy, once he dies, he loses his power. And the people that are around him, right, they're going to be scurrying like rats for all the stuff that they're going to be held accountable for. They have a short reign of power. If he gives one of his sons, he makes one of his sons the mastery, it'll be over. The organization will be over. Like, it just, people won't be having it. Like, it's already fractured, and they don't have charisma. They're not bringing new people in. And the old people are waking up more and more. It was amazing that Chargy kept on saying, wake up over and over again. When you talk to these Gujaratis, and they name Kamlesh Bai by name. So anyways, I just wanted to add that here. Okay, so I turned that into a separate video. For my, other channel, exposing the Heartfulness cult dodgy scam channel. And I just want to read a few whispers messages here. Okay, so there might be 5 of them. I don't know if I read this already, but I'll do it again if I have. Saturday, December 18th, 1999, 10 a.m. The ancient writings underwent transformation over the course of centuries by human alterations and deletions. In no religions are the documents presented today entirely what the originals were. In every era, certain people believed themselves to be inspired and made modifications that suited them. One will have to be very wary of that with regard to what we have written. Our books must not meet with the same fate. See that Dodgy's already done this. So Dodgy's done this with all of it. They are not testimonies for this. They are not testimonies for this or that individual, but our own writing. Even if it has to take time, we hope that one day these messages will be brought to the attention of those wanting to accept them. There, too, we hope that beings believing themselves to be superior and claiming to follow their inspiration will not come along and make cuts and suppress what they deem inappropriate. These writings are to be taken as they are. We insist and often enough on this point, knowing the whimsical minds of people and their often surprising assessments. Babaji. Well, it's all there, right? That's just what it is, right? That's what happened with religions. It's what Daji is doing now, and it's just all of it. And so the next one, there's a series on computers. Sunday, December 19th, 1999. With all of us, you can express all the love. There is no risk of disappointment as with human beings. It's not always easy in your world to let one's feelings show. You are all heading towards very sad times. Again, 1999. Over-computerized, where humans will be communicating using the internet or other means. There is anonymity. There in anonymity, everything can be said. The best as well as the worst, right? This is 1999. The medium is already diabolical in some respects. It is exploited dangerously. A kind of mafia has taken possession of it, and it is an easy means to dupe others. Therefore, take advantage of these modern technologies to make your lives easier, but don't fall into the traps that they can hide. Don't become like automatons. It is not dishonorable to show your sensitivity, your love of beauty, or what inspires you in human being, in music or in poem. When this is expressed, the beauty of nature, of the divine love, all of that lives and moves in a homage to the creator, Babaji. Now, there's still some people, lots of people, who don't accept the whispers messages, but this is from 1999. I wasn't on the internet to 2003 or 4, and then I wasn't really on it until 2007, and then I started my YouTube channel. But I was late to the party. But the internet was nothing like it was. And, part of it was them solving how to put videos up on the internet, which changed everything with YouTube, right? And I'm someone who makes my living on the internet now, and I was late to the party. But 1999, lots of people weren't even familiar with the internet yet. And this is him saying what's happened now. This is, all of it with the anonymity and the, all the stuff, like all the stuff with the internet that he's talking about here. And then he does a follow-up message to that. Okay, apparently I saved that one twice. Here's the other one. It's actually before the religious one. Tuesday, December 14th, 1999, 10 a.m. It is truly now the future of the mission must be built. You are all entering a new era and will have to develop your ability to adapt. Society will transform on all levels, following upheavals of all kinds. On the economic level, increasing refined technology will produce human tragedies. Human beings will have to cope and keep up, willing or by force, in order to survive. This process is already underway. The culmination of this mutation is not for tomorrow. Don't panic. Progress, since we must call it that, is inhuman in many ways, but it cannot be stopped. Be both in the world, as you must all take responsibilities for your lives, and out of the world by taking refuge in your sadhana. Not everyone is so fortunate. Shrinks are increasingly numerous, and for their part, they are not about to be out of work. Shrinks is psychologists, psychiatrists. People are withdrawing into themselves and communicating with difficulty. Various forms of pollution are attacking their physical health and balance. All this should normally push them to find the remedy within themselves. Babaji. Okay, there's anyways, here's the last one. Let me find that. I'm in the wrong place here. Here it is. There's two to do with the star symbol, which I'll make a separate video. I'll just end this one here. I'll do these separately and put them on my Gratefulness meditation channel because I got all that stuff there to do with the esoteric symbol. I'll do that in the next couple of days. I haven't been paying attention to that channel because I've been making so much content on the Heartfulness cult channel, but there's two esoteric symbols. But this is interesting with the tech stuff, and you know, it was starting then, but what he's talking about is in full. You know, it's in full. I mean, maybe it's going to get worse. I just did a video about Reacher 2 series on Amazon that's clearly written by AI or has AI contributions to it. Very mechanical dialogue. And, you know, the AI stuff in all of it, right? And, you know, it's inhuman. It's without soul. It's without heart. And then just the addiction to the internet, the amount of time kids are spending on the internet, and just all of that stuff. But let's wrap this one up here. I'm still going to make another video on my Apocalypse Now channel. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramano, definitely pointing for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.